Hello there, and welcome back to Science to Fall Asleep. Tonight, let your breathing become a little slower, let the room around you become a little quieter, and allow your imagination to travel thousands of years into the past. There is a place where the desert seems to stretch endlessly beneath a dark and ancient sky. A place where a great river moves slowly through golden sands, carrying life through one of the driest landscapes on Earth. Along its banks, reeds sway gently in the evening breeze, birds settle into their nests, boats drift quietly across the water, and distant temples stand beneath the stars. This is ancient Egypt, and tonight, you do not need to hurry through it. There will be no examination, no difficult dates to memorize, and no need to remember every name. Instead, we are simply going to wander through the ancient world at a peaceful pace, listening to stories about ordinary people, enormous monuments, mysterious tombs, beautiful temples, ancient mathematics, medicine, food, animals, writing, astronomy, religion, daily life, and the remarkable civilization that grew beside the Nile. So make yourself comfortable. Perhaps you are already lying beneath a blanket. Perhaps the lights are low. Perhaps the sounds around you are beginning to fade. And as you listen, imagine that the modern world is slowly becoming more distant. The traffic disappears. The bright screens disappear. The busy streets disappear. And gradually, the sounds of the present are replaced by something much older. The soft movement of water. The whisper of wind across reeds. The distant call of a bird. And somewhere far away, the quiet footsteps of someone walking along a riverbank beneath the stars. The Nile is flowing. For thousands of years, this river was the center of Egyptian life. It was not simply a river in the way we might think of a river today. To the people who lived along its banks, the Nile was the foundation of almost everything. It provided water. It provided fish. It provided transportation. It helped grow crops. It connected communities. It carried stones and timber and food. It influenced calendars. It shaped religion. And it gave Egypt a remarkable contrast between fertile land and surrounding desert. From above, the landscape around the Nile would have looked almost magical. A narrow ribbon of green would follow the winding river, surrounded on both sides by vast stretches of dry, golden desert. This contrast helped shape one of the most recognizable landscapes in human history. The ancient Egyptians themselves had names for these contrasting environments. The fertile land beside the river was associated with life, growth, and renewal. The desert was associated with dryness and the forces beyond the cultivated world. The Nile created a narrow world of abundance surrounded by a much larger world of sand and stone. And every year, the river's seasonal behavior played an enormous role in Egyptian agriculture. For generations, people watched the river carefully. They learned its rhythms. They learned when fields could be planted. They learned when crops could be harvested. They learned how to organize labor around the changing landscape. The Nile was therefore not merely something that flowed through Egypt. In many ways, Egypt grew according to its rhythm. Imagine standing beside it at night. The surface of the water is dark. The moon may be reflected between gentle ripples. The air is cooler than it was during the heat of the day. Across the river, perhaps a small boat moves silently through the darkness. There are no engines, no electric lights, only the movement of a paddle, the sound of water against wood, and the occasional cry of a night bird. This was a world without modern clocks, but it was not a world without time. Ancient Egyptians paid close attention to the movement of the sun, the moon, and the stars. The sky was an enormous natural clock. The changing position of the sun helped organize the day. The moon provided another visible rhythm. and the annual cycle of the Nile helped organize the agricultural year. Egyptian civilization developed one of the world's earliest sophisticated calendar systems. The ancient Egyptian civil calendar contained 365 days. It was divided into 12 months of 30 days each, followed by 5 additional days at the end of the year. Those 5 days were treated as a special period associated with the birthdays of important deities in Egyptian tradition. But there was a subtle problem. The actual solar year is slightly longer than 365 days. That small difference meant that the Egyptian calendar gradually shifted relative to the seasons. Over long periods of time, the calendar could drift significantly. It is a beautiful reminder that even an ancient civilization capable of building enormous monuments was still working with observations, approximations, and the limitations of human measurement. And yet, their understanding of the natural world was often remarkably sophisticated. Look again toward the horizon. The first faint light of morning is beginning to appear. The darkness above the desert is turning deep blue, then violet, then pale gold. Eventually, the sun rises over the eastern horizon. For the ancient Egyptians, the daily journey of the sun had enormous religious meaning. The sun appeared to be born in the morning. It crossed the sky during the day, and in the evening, it disappeared into the western horizon. The West became strongly associated with the realm of the dead, partly because the sun itself appeared to travel into that direction at the end of each day. This connection between the setting sun and the afterlife influenced the placement of many tombs and burial grounds. The western desert became a landscape of the dead. Meanwhile, the eastern side of the Nile was more closely associated with sunrise, life, temples, and the world of the living. It was a beautifully simple cosmic idea. The sun disappears. The sun returns. Life disappears. Life returns. And this cycle of disappearance and renewal became deeply woven into Egyptian thought. Perhaps that is one reason the ancient Egyptians spent so much effort thinking about what happens after death. Death was not necessarily imagined as a final ending. Instead, many Egyptians imagined existence continuing in another form. The body mattered. The name mattered. Memory mattered. Offerings mattered. And the preservation of the body became one of the most recognizable traditions associated with ancient Egypt. Today, when people hear the word mummy, they often immediately imagine a wrapped human body lying inside a dark tomb. But mummification was more than simply wrapping a body in cloth. It was a complex process developed over many centuries, and it changed significantly throughout Egyptian history. In the earliest periods, natural conditions sometimes helped preserve bodies. The dry desert sand could remove moisture from a body surprisingly effectively. Over time, Egyptian embalmers developed increasingly sophisticated techniques for deliberately preserving the dead. One of the most important substances was natron, a naturally occurring mixture of salts. Natron could be used to dry the body, and drying was extremely important because microorganisms responsible for decomposition require moisture. By removing much of that moisture, embalmers could dramatically slow the natural processes of decay. The ancient Egyptians did not understand microorganisms in the modern scientific sense. They did not know about bacteria or the biochemical mechanisms of decomposition. Yet through observation and accumulated experience, they learned techniques that produced remarkably preserved bodies. This is one of the fascinating patterns throughout ancient history. People did not need modern laboratory equipment to discover useful principles. They could observe nature. They could experiment. They could compare results. They could pass knowledge from one generation to another. And over centuries, practical knowledge could become extraordinarily refined. The preparation of a body could involve removing internal organs. The brain, for example, was treated differently from organs such as the liver, lungs, stomach, and intestines. In many periods, the internal organs were preserved separately. They could be placed into containers now commonly known as canopic jars. These containers became associated with four protective deities known as the four sons of Horus. Each was connected with particular organs and protection. The heart had a special place in Egyptian belief. Rather than being treated as simply another organ, the heart was often regarded as the center of thought, character, memory, and moral identity. This is especially interesting because modern people often associate thinking with the brain. Ancient Egyptian thought placed enormous importance on the heart. During the imagined judgment of the dead, the heart could be weighed against the feather associated with Ma'at, the principle of truth, order, justice, and cosmic balance. Imagine the scene. A person has died. The journey beyond life begins. The heart is placed upon one side of a balance. On the other side rests a feather. The scale must remain balanced. The image is powerful because it transforms morality into something almost physical. A person's life is represented by the weight of the heart. Were they truthful? Were they just? Did they respect the balance of the world? Did they live in harmony with Ma'at? These ideas gave Egyptian civilization a strong sense that the universe itself possessed an underlying order. The sun rose. The Nile flooded. The stars followed their patterns. The seasons changed. Kings ruled. Families grew. People died. And through all of this, maintaining balance was deeply important. The ancient Egyptian word Ma'at represented much more than simply telling the truth. It could encompass order, harmony, justice, stability, and the proper functioning of the universe. Its opposite was disorder and chaos. For the ancient Egyptians, civilization itself could be understood as a force holding back chaos. This helps explain the importance of the pharaoh. The king was not merely a political ruler in the modern sense. The pharaoh had an important religious role and was understood as a central figure in maintaining cosmic order. Temples, rituals, offerings, festivals, and royal ceremonies were all connected to the broader idea that the world needed to remain in balance. And now, as the sun climbs higher, imagine approaching one of those temples. Its walls are enormous. Massive stone surfaces rise above you. The scale is difficult to comprehend. Carved figures cover the walls. Hieroglyphic inscriptions run across columns. Some scenes show kings standing before gods. Others show offerings. Still others record military victories, religious ceremonies, royal achievements, or prayers. The writing looks almost like artwork. Birds, eyes, hands, reeds, animals, geometric symbols, human figures. These are hieroglyphs. Ancient Egyptian writing developed over a very long period and used several different writing systems and styles. Hieroglyphic writing was often used for monumental and religious inscriptions, but it was not the only form of Egyptian writing. There were also more cursive forms used for practical purposes. One of these was hieratic. Later, demotic writing became widely used for everyday documents. This means that ancient Egyptian writing was not simply one system used everywhere for everything. Just as modern societies have different forms of writing for formal documents, handwriting, signs, messages, and specialized purposes, ancient Egypt had different scripts for different needs. And behind all of these systems was an enormous intellectual achievement. People had developed a way to record language that meant ideas could survive the person who first spoke them. A measurement could be written down. A contract could be recorded. A medical recipe could be copied. A prayer could be preserved. A person's name could remain visible on a wall for thousands of years. This connection between writing and memory was particularly important in Egyptian culture. To preserve a name was, in a sense, to help preserve the person's existence. That is why names were carefully recorded on monuments and objects. A person's name was not merely a convenient label. It was part of their identity. If a name remained alive, the person could continue to be remembered. And this brings us gently toward one of the most famous structures ever created by human hands. The Great Pyramid. Imagine approaching it slowly. From a distance, it rises above the desert like an artificial mountain. Its sides climb toward the sky. Its base covers an enormous area. The individual stones are massive, and yet the structure is not simply a pile of rocks. It was carefully planned. Its orientation is remarkably precise. Its sides face the cardinal directions with impressive accuracy. The Great Pyramid was built during the reign of Pharaoh Khufu, also known as Cheops. It formed part of a larger funerary complex at Giza. The pyramid was not designed as an isolated monument. It belonged to a landscape containing temples, causeways, smaller pyramids, tombs, and other structures. The entire complex was part of a carefully organized world surrounding royal burial and the afterlife. For a very long time, popular stories imagined the pyramids being built by enormous armies of slaves. Modern archaeological evidence presents a more complicated picture. Workers who built the pyramids included organized laborers, skilled craftsmen, and people who were housed, fed, and managed as part of a large state project. Some workers were likely seasonal laborers whose agricultural work was temporarily interrupted by the flooding of the Nile. During periods when fields could not be cultivated, labor could be redirected toward construction projects. This created a fascinating connection between agriculture, the Nile, and monumental architecture. The same river that helped feed Egypt also helped support the workforce and transportation networks that made enormous construction projects possible. Stone could be transported by boat along the Nile and its channels. Large quantities of food had to be organized. Workers required shelter. Tools had to be supplied. Construction had to be coordinated. The Great Pyramid therefore represents not only architecture, it represents administration, mathematics, engineering, transportation, food production, labor organization, stoneworking, surveying, and an extraordinary ability to coordinate thousands of people toward a shared goal. Think of the silence around the pyramid after the workers have gone home. The stones are warm from the day, the desert begins to cool, the sun moves lower, and the pyramid casts a long shadow across the sand. When it was originally completed, the Great Pyramid looked very different from the weathered monument we see today. Its outer surface was covered with polished limestone casing stones. In sunlight, those smooth stones would have reflected brilliantly. The pyramid may have appeared almost luminous against the desert landscape. At the very top was a pyramidion. Although the exact history of the original capstone remains uncertain. The ancient monument was therefore not originally the rough, stepped-looking stone structure that modern photographs often suggest. It was a smooth, bright geometric form rising from the desert. And it was once the tallest human-made structure in the world. For thousands of years, it held that distinction. That fact alone gives the monument a remarkable place in human history. Generation after generation was born, lived, aged, and died while the Great Pyramid continued to dominate the horizon. Languages changed. Kings came and went. Political powers rose and collapsed. Entire societies transformed. And the pyramid remained. Imagine being an Egyptian child thousands of years ago and seeing it for the first time. Perhaps you would have already heard stories about the Great Monument. Perhaps your parents had told you about the king whose tomb it was. Perhaps you had walked past smaller pyramids and tombs. But standing near the Great Pyramid, looking upward, you would have encountered a scale that was difficult to comprehend. And yet ancient Egypt was not only a civilization of kings and pyramids. Most Egyptians did not live inside monumental tombs. They lived ordinary lives. They cooked. They worked. They raised children. They argued. They celebrated. They traded. They repaired houses. They cared for animals. They worried about harvests. They enjoyed music. They played games. They drank beer. They ate bread. They slept. And these ordinary details are among the most fascinating parts of ancient Egyptian history. Because behind every enormous temple were millions of small human moments. A child waking before sunrise. A farmer walking toward a field. A baker preparing dough. A fisherman checking a net. A scribe dipping a reed pen into ink. A mother preparing food. A craftsman shaping wood. A boatman guiding a vessel along the river. A priest preparing for a ritual. A family gathering together as the evening cooled. Ancient Egypt becomes much more interesting when we stop seeing it only as a civilization of monuments and begin imagining the people who lived within it. Bread and beer were fundamental parts of the Egyptian diet. Beer in ancient Egypt was quite different from the beverages many people associate with modern beer. It was often relatively thick and nutritious and could be an important source of calories. Bread was equally important. Grain was a central agricultural product, and bread could be prepared in many forms. For many ordinary people, bread and beer were basic staples. The Egyptian diet could also include vegetables, fruits, fish, poultry, and other foods depending on location, wealth, and availability. Dates were widely enjoyed. Onions were important. Garlic was known. Lentils and other legumes could provide additional nutrition. The Nile itself provided an enormous supply of fish. Fishing could be carried out using nets, hooks, traps, and other techniques. The river was not simply a transportation route. It was a living source of food. Along its banks grew papyrus. Papyrus was one of the most useful plants in ancient Egypt. It could be used to make writing material. It could be woven into mats. It could be used in boats and baskets. Parts of the plant could even be used as food. The word paper ultimately has a connection to papyrus through the long history of writing materials. Imagine a scribe sitting quietly in a shaded room. In front of him is a sheet of papyrus. Beside him are small containers of ink. His writing tool is made from a cut reed. With careful strokes, he records words. The scribe's profession was highly valued because literacy was limited. Most people in ancient Egypt could not read and write. A trained scribe therefore possessed a powerful practical skill. Scribes could work for the government, temples, estates, merchants, or other institutions. They could record taxes, keep inventories, write letters, copy religious texts, record legal agreements, calculate quantities, and maintain administrative records. The ability to write was closely connected with the functioning of the state. A large kingdom cannot easily collect grain, organize labor, manage warehouses, maintain armies, and administer land without some method of record-keeping. Writing transformed administration, and numbers were just as important as words. Ancient Egyptian mathematics was practical. People needed mathematics to measure fields, calculate quantities, manage construction, distribute food, calculate wages, track taxes, and organize resources. The annual flooding of the Nile could change the boundaries and productivity of farmland. Surveyors therefore needed methods for measuring land. Geometry developed partly from these practical needs. Ancient Egyptians were capable of sophisticated calculations involving areas, volumes, fractions, and proportions. They used a system based largely on unit fractions. Instead of writing a fraction such as 3/5 in the same way we commonly do today, Egyptian mathematical notation often represented it as a sum of distinct unit fractions. Their mathematical methods may appear unfamiliar, but they could solve surprisingly complex practical problems. Imagine a surveyor walking across a field with measuring equipment. The land has changed after the flood. The boundaries must be determined again. Measurements are taken, numbers are recorded, calculations are performed, and eventually, a new boundary can be established. Mathematics is quietly maintaining order. The same idea appears in architecture. A monumental building requires measurements. Angles must be controlled. Stone quantities must be estimated. Distances must be planned. Workers must know where to place each block. A small error repeated across thousands of stones can become a major problem. And yet Egyptian builders achieved remarkable precision. Their success did not require modern computers. It required generations of accumulated knowledge, skilled craftsmen, careful observation, practical mathematics, and disciplined organization. As evening returns, the desert begins to cool again. The sky changes color. The heat of the day slowly disappears. The pyramid becomes darker against the horizon. And above it, stars begin to appear. Ancient Egyptians paid close attention to the night sky. Some stars and constellations were connected to religious ideas. The stars that appeared to remain near the celestial north were particularly significant because they seemed never to disappear below the horizon. These circumpolar stars could become associated with eternity and the afterlife. The Egyptians also observed the annual appearance of certain stars. One of the most important was Sirius. Its heliacal rising, when the star became visible just before sunrise after a period of invisibility, was closely associated with the annual cycle of the Nile in later Egyptian history. Sirius was known by an Egyptian name connected with the goddess Sopdet. Its appearance was an important celestial event. The night sky was therefore not simply decoration. It was a calendar, a source of religious symbolism, a guide to seasonal changes, and a permanent presence above the Nile Valley. When you look upward tonight, imagine the same stars shining over Egypt thousands of years ago. The stars themselves have not suddenly appeared. They have been shining for unimaginably long periods. Ancient people looked at them. Modern people look at them. The same light traveled across space. Only the observers changed. And perhaps that is one of the most peaceful things about studying ancient history. It reminds us that the human world changes incredibly quickly, while the natural world often moves according to much slower rhythms. Cities disappear. Languages evolve. Empires collapse. Monuments weather. But the stars continue. The Nile continues to flow. The desert continues to shift. And somewhere beneath the sand and stone are traces of countless lives that once seemed as immediate and important to the people living them as ours do today. Ancient Egypt lasted for an extraordinary length of time. When people say ancient Egypt, it can sound as though they are talking about one single society that remained unchanged for thousands of years. But that is far from true. Egyptian civilization developed through many periods. Kings changed. Religious beliefs evolved. Art styles changed. Political structures transformed. Foreign powers arrived. Languages shifted. Technology developed. And yet certain cultural traditions remained remarkably persistent. The civilization we call ancient Egypt lasted for more than 3,000 years in recognizable forms. That is an enormous span of time. To put it into perspective, the pyramids were already ancient monuments to many Egyptians living during later periods of Egyptian history. The people who built the Great Pyramid lived thousands of years before Cleopatra. Cleopatra lived much closer in time to the modern era than she did to the construction of the Great Pyramid. This is one of the most surprising details about Egyptian history. Cleopatra is often imagined as belonging to the same general world as the pyramid builders. But chronologically, an enormous gulf separated them. The Great Pyramid was built around the middle of the 3rd millennium BCE. Cleopatra lived in the 1st century BCE. By her lifetime, the pyramids at Giza had already been standing for roughly 2,500 years. Imagine visiting a monument that was already older than the entire span of recorded Canadian history by many times. That is the scale of time involved. And Cleopatra herself was part of the Ptolemaic dynasty, a ruling family of Macedonian Greek origin that governed Egypt after the conquests of Alexander the Great. She was Egyptian in the political and cultural sense of ruling Egypt, but her dynasty descended from Macedonian Greeks. She also became deeply associated with Egyptian religious traditions and was portrayed in Egyptian artistic forms. Her world, therefore, represented a fascinating blending of cultures: Greek, Egyptian, Mediterranean, African, Near Eastern, and Roman. Ancient Egypt was never completely isolated. The Nile connected Egypt internally, but Egypt also interacted with neighboring regions through trade, diplomacy, migration, warfare, and cultural exchange. Goods traveled into Egypt from Nubia, the Levant, the Eastern Desert, and beyond. Gold was particularly important. Egypt possessed significant gold resources, especially in regions to the south and east. Gold did not tarnish easily, making it symbolically attractive for objects associated with the gods and the royal elite. It was connected with the sun. It could represent something enduring and incorruptible. Silver was actually rarer in Egypt during many periods than gold. This is another detail that surprises modern observers. Today, silver is generally less valuable than gold. But ancient Egyptians sometimes treated silver as a particularly precious material because local supplies were limited and much of it had to be imported. The value of materials depends not only on their intrinsic properties, but also on availability and cultural meaning. Gold was plentiful enough in certain Egyptian regions to be widely used by elites. Silver was more difficult to obtain. Precious stones were also imported. Lapis lazuli, for example, traveled enormous distances from regions of Central Asia. Its intense blue color made it highly desirable. Turquoise came from the Sinai Peninsula. Carnelian and other stones were used in jewelry. Egyptian artisans became highly skilled at working these materials. Jewelry was not simply decorative. It could communicate social status. It could have religious meaning. It could serve protective purposes. Amulets were especially important. Small objects shaped like scarab beetles, eyes, gods, animals, and other symbols could be worn or placed with the dead. One of the most famous Egyptian symbols is the scarab. The scarab beetle had a remarkable association with the sun and renewal. Dung beetles roll balls of material across the ground and later bury them. Ancient observers saw this behavior and connected it with cycles of creation and rebirth. The scarab became associated with Khepri, a deity connected with the rising sun. A small beetle, therefore, became part of a much larger cosmic story. Nature was full of symbols. Animals were not merely animals. The ibis could be associated with Thoth. The falcon could be associated with Horus. The jackal could be associated with Anubis. The cat could be associated with goddesses such as Batet. Crocodiles could be associated with Sobuk. These associations did not mean that every Egyptian treated every animal as sacred in exactly the same way. Egyptian religious beliefs were complex and varied across time and region. But animals could occupy important symbolic and religious roles. Cats became particularly famous in Egyptian culture. Domestic cats were valued for their ability to control pests such as rodents. They could protect stored grain. Over time, cats also became strongly associated with religious traditions. Batet, originally represented in feline-related forms, became especially associated with protection, fertility, motherhood, music, and domestic life. Cats appear frequently in Egyptian art. They could be depicted sitting beside people, under chairs, or participating in scenes of domestic life. Some wealthy families kept cats as companions. Cats were not simply mysterious temple creatures. They could be part of ordinary households. And when we imagine a quiet Egyptian home at night, perhaps a cat is curled somewhere nearby. The house is dark. The day's heat is fading. A small oil lamp casts a warm glow across the room. Someone is preparing the last meal of the day. Children are settling down. The Nile continues moving outside, and the cat watches silently. Thousands of years separate us from that household, yet the scene feels strangely familiar. People have always needed somewhere to sleep. People have always needed food. People have always cared about their families. People have always worried about tomorrow. People have always found comfort in familiar routines. This is perhaps the most intimate connection between us and ancient Egypt. Not the pyramids, not the pharaohs, not the golden masks, but ordinary life. The simple things: a meal, a conversation, a child's laughter, a tired worker returning home, a quiet evening beside the river, a family gathering under the stars. These moments were never carved into every temple wall, but they happened, and archaeology sometimes allows us to glimpse them. Ancient houses have been excavated, tools have survived, food remains have been discovered, letters have been preserved, children's toys have been found, clothing and sandals have survived in unusually dry conditions. These objects can tell us about people whose names were never recorded in monumental inscriptions. A small object can sometimes tell a more personal story than a giant statue. A child's toy may reveal play. A broken bowl may reveal cooking. A sandal may reveal how people moved through their world. A letter may reveal frustration, affection, business, or family concerns. Together, these fragments create a picture of ancient life, and slowly, the monumental civilization begins to feel human. The Egyptians also had a strong tradition of music. Musical instruments included harps, flutes, drums, rattles, lyres, and other stringed instruments. Music could accompany religious ceremonies, celebrations, dancing, banquets, and ordinary entertainment. Imagine hearing a harp beside the Nile in the evening. The notes would travel gently through the warm air. Perhaps someone is singing. Perhaps dancers are moving nearby. Perhaps food is being served. Perhaps the evening is part of a festival. Festivals were important in Egyptian religious and social life. Temples were not silent museums. They were active institutions. Priests performed rituals. Offerings were presented. Processions moved through sacred spaces. Images of gods could be carried during ceremonies. Large crowds could gather for festivals associated with particular deities. The religious calendar gave structure to the year, and temples were also economic centers. They could control land, employ workers, store grain, manage workshops, and maintain large administrative systems. This means that religion and economy were deeply connected. A temple was not simply a place where people went to pray. It could be a major institution with farms, livestock, workshops, storage facilities, priests, scribes, and administrators. The temple complex could function almost like a city within a city. Some temples were enormous. Karnak, near modern Luxor, developed over many centuries and became one of the largest religious complexes of the ancient world. It was not built all at once. Different rulers added structures, expanded courtyards, raised columns, built sanctuaries, added obelisks, and decorated walls. Walking through Karnak would therefore be like walking through layers of Egyptian history. One generation built something, another expanded it, another restored it, another added its own inscriptions. The result was a monumental landscape assembled across centuries. Columns could be enormous. Some were carved to resemble bundles of papyrus stems. Others incorporated floral forms. The architecture itself reflected the natural world of the Nile Valley. Plants became stone. Stone became sacred architecture, and sunlight moved through the spaces as the day progressed. At certain times, beams of sunlight could illuminate particular areas. The ancient architects understood the movement of light and shadow. Temples could therefore create carefully controlled experiences. Entering a temple was often a movement from brighter public spaces toward darker and more restricted sacred areas. The deeper one traveled, the fewer people might be permitted to enter. The innermost sanctuary was a special place. It might contain an image of the deity. The temple was understood as the god's house. Priests performed daily rituals. Offerings were presented. The image could be dressed, cleansed, and cared for symbolically. These rituals were not necessarily public performances. Many were conducted by priests within restricted spaces. The general population might experience the presence of the deity during festivals and processions rather than entering the innermost sanctuary. This created a fascinating relationship between visibility and mystery. The gods were everywhere. Their images appeared on walls. Their names appeared in inscriptions. Their stories were told in temples. But the most sacred spaces remained hidden. The architecture itself created a sense of increasing mystery. And perhaps tonight, as you listen, you can imagine walking slowly through one of those ancient spaces. Your footsteps are quiet. The stone beneath your feet is cool. Tall columns disappear into darkness above you. The air smells faintly of incense. Somewhere in the distance, water moves. A priest walks past. A small flame flickers. And beyond the walls, the desert stretches toward the horizon. There is no need to rush. Ancient Egypt has thousands of stories. We have only begun to wander through them. And as the night becomes quieter, we can continue drifting deeper into this ancient world, toward the people who built the pyramids, the physicians who treated injuries, the astronomers who watched the heavens, the farmers who depended on the Nile, the artists who painted tombs, the rulers who claimed divine authority, the workers who moved enormous stones, and the families who simply hoped that tomorrow would be a little kinder than today. For now, let the Nile continue flowing in your imagination. Let the desert remain still. Let the stars remain above you. And let ancient Egypt slowly unfold, one quiet story at a time. The stars remain above the Nile, quiet and distant, while the last warmth of the day slowly disappears from the stones. And somewhere along the river, another evening in ancient Egypt is beginning. Perhaps a fisherman is pulling his boat toward the shore. Perhaps a farmer is returning from the fields. Perhaps a group of workers is carrying baskets of grain toward a storehouse. And somewhere in the distance, a temple rises above the rooftops, its walls glowing faintly beneath the final light of sunset. To understand ancient Egypt, it helps to remember that the civilization was not built in the middle of an empty desert. It was built beside water. The Nile made agriculture possible. Its floodplain created fertile soil. Its channels provided transportation. Its fish supplied food. Its reeds provided useful materials. And its predictable seasonal rhythm helped people organize their lives. The river was so central that ancient Egyptian civilization is sometimes described as a gift of the Nile. But the relationship was more complicated than that. The river provided enormous opportunities, but it also required careful management. Too little water could threaten crops. Too much water could damage settlements. Farmers had to understand the landscape. Administrators had to organize irrigation and agriculture. Communities had to cooperate. The Nile connected people, but it also shaped where they could live. Most of Egypt's population was concentrated along a relatively narrow strip of fertile land. Beyond that green ribbon, the desert began. The desert itself, however, was not completely empty. It contained valuable resources: stone quarries, gold, copper, turquoise, salt, and routes connecting Egypt with neighboring regions. The eastern desert between the Nile Valley and the Red Sea was especially important. Caravans crossed it. Mining expeditions traveled through it. Quarries supplied stone for temples and monuments. The desert could be harsh, but it was also a source of wealth. Ancient Egyptians developed knowledge of routes, wells, landmarks, and seasonal conditions. Travel across the desert required planning. Water was precious. A caravan could not simply wander into the landscape and hope to find a spring. Routes had to be known. Supplies had to be organized. Animals had to be managed. And people had to understand how long particular journeys could take. The desert therefore became another part of Egypt's network of movement. The Nile was the main highway. The desert contained secondary roads, and the Red Sea opened another route toward distant lands. Ships traveled along the Red Sea coast. Egyptian expeditions also traveled southward into Nubia and beyond. Nubia was especially important to Egypt. The region south of Egypt was a source of gold, ivory, exotic animals, stone, and other resources. It was also a place of powerful kingdoms and cultures in its own right. Egyptian history cannot be understood without recognizing the importance of Nubia. The relationship between Egypt and Nubian societies changed over time. There were periods of trade, periods of warfare, periods of Egyptian control, and periods when Nubian rulers themselves controlled Egypt. One of the most remarkable episodes occurred during the 25th dynasty. Kings from the kingdom of Kush, centered in Nubia, conquered and ruled Egypt. These rulers adopted many Egyptian traditions and presented themselves within the ancient Egyptian royal tradition. This reminds us that ancient Egypt was not an isolated civilization with a single unchanging identity. Its history was constantly interacting with surrounding cultures. People moved, ideas moved, objects moved, languages interacted, religious traditions influenced one another, and political power changed hands. Yet Egyptian culture had an extraordinary ability to absorb outside influences while preserving older traditions. This is particularly visible in religion. Egyptian religion was not based on one single god. There were many deities, and different regions could have their own important gods and traditions. Some gods became especially prominent at particular times. Others could be combined. Two deities might be merged into a composite form. A god could change in importance as political centers changed. This flexibility allowed Egyptian religion to develop over thousands of years. Among the most famous deities was Ra, associated with the sun. But Ra was not always simply understood as a single unchanging figure. He could be connected with other gods, forming combined identities such as Ammonius Ra. Ammonius became especially important in Thebes. The temple complex at Karnak became one of the great centers of his worship. The rise of Ammonius was closely connected with the political importance of Thebes. This shows how religion and politics could influence each other. When a city became powerful, The god associated with that city could also become more influential. And when a king wanted to strengthen a particular temple or priesthood, religious institutions could gain enormous resources. The priests of Ammonius eventually became extremely powerful. In some periods, their wealth and influence rivaled that of the central government. Ancient Egyptian history, therefore, involved not only kings and foreign enemies, but also internal balances of power. The pharaoh had to maintain relationships with officials, military leaders, priests, administrators, and regional authorities. The state was a complex organization. At the top stood the king. Below him were high officials. Viziers played important administrative roles. Scribes kept records. Governors managed regions. Priests managed temples. Farmers produced food. Craftsmen produced tools and luxury objects. Workers constructed buildings. Soldiers protected borders. Boats transported goods. A civilization capable of supporting enormous temples and pyramids required thousands upon thousands of interconnected tasks. Most of those tasks were not glamorous. Someone had to bake the bread. Someone had to count the grain. Someone had to repair the boats. Someone had to maintain the irrigation systems. Someone had to make pottery. Someone had to cut stone. Someone had to transport water. Someone had to care for animals. Someone had to clean workshops. Someone had to record everything. History often remembers the person whose name was carved into stone. But civilizations are actually built by countless people whose names disappeared. Their work remains even when their identities are forgotten. A wall does not tell you the name of every person who mixed plaster. A temple column does not tell you the names of every worker who moved stone. A loaf of bread found in an archaeological context does not tell you who baked it. But someone did, and that person had a life. Perhaps they had children. Perhaps they had parents. Perhaps they had worries about the harvest. Perhaps they laughed with friends. Perhaps they complained about work. Perhaps they enjoyed a festival. Perhaps they once sat beside the Nile at sunset and watched the same colors we are imagining now. Ancient Egypt becomes more intimate when we allow ourselves to think about these unnamed people. One of the most interesting sources of information about workers comes from the village of Deir el-Medina. This community housed skilled craftsmen who worked on royal tombs in the Valley of the Kings. Unlike many ancient workers whose lives are almost invisible to history, the people of Deir el-Medina left behind an unusually rich collection of written records, letters, administrative documents, lists, legal texts, personal writings, and records of disputes. Through these documents, historians can glimpse ordinary concerns. Workers could complain about missing rations. They could argue with neighbors. They could take days off. They could borrow objects. They could participate in legal proceedings. They could have family problems. They could be involved in complicated relationships. The people who lived thousands of years ago were not abstract figures. They were human beings. And sometimes their personalities come through the surviving records. There were disagreements. There were accusations. There were apologies. There were debts. There were requests. There were moments of humor. There were moments of frustration. This is one reason ancient letters are so fascinating. A monument tells us what a ruler wanted people to remember. A private letter can tell us what someone actually worried about that day. Imagine a worker sitting with a piece of writing material, composing a message to someone who has not shown up for work. Or imagine someone asking a relative for help, or a person complaining about an unpaid debt. The writing may be thousands of years old, but the emotional experience can feel surprisingly familiar. People still worry about money. People still get annoyed when others fail to keep promises. People still ask relatives for help. People still worry about family. The basic human experience has not changed as dramatically as technology has. And nowhere is that clearer than in the ancient Egyptian approach to health. Egyptian medicine combined observation, practical treatment, ritual, and religious belief. Healers could use plants, minerals, animal products, bandages, splints, and other remedies. Medical texts preserved recipes and instructions. Some treatments were based on practical observations that may have genuinely helped. Others were accompanied by magical or religious formulas. To modern eyes, the combination can seem strange. But to ancient Egyptians, there was no strict separation between the physical and spiritual worlds in the way modern medicine often distinguishes them. A person could have a physical injury and still require spiritual protection. A treatment might involve both a substance and a spoken formula. A wound could be cleaned and bandaged while a protective prayer was recited. The ancient Egyptians had considerable practical experience with injuries. Construction work, agriculture, animal handling, military activity, and everyday accidents all created opportunities for wounds and fractures. Evidence from mummies and skeletons allows modern researchers to study ancient diseases and injuries. Bones can preserve signs of trauma. Teeth can reveal diet and health. Mummies can preserve tissues and sometimes evidence of disease. Archaeology therefore gives us a kind of biological archive. The human body itself becomes a historical document. Ancient Egyptian dentistry could be difficult because diets contained particles of stone and sand from grinding grain. Tiny mineral particles could wear down teeth. Some people suffered severe dental problems. Ancient Egyptian food processing involved grinding grain with stone tools. Small fragments could enter the flour. Repeated exposure over years could contribute to dental wear. Imagine eating bread every day for decades. The bread might be nourishing. It might even be delicious. But tiny particles hidden within it could gradually wear away the protective surfaces of the teeth. Some ancient Egyptians experienced abscesses and infections. Dental problems were not a minor issue. Severe infections could become dangerous. Ancient medicine had no antibiotics. A condition that is easily treated today could become life-threatening in the ancient world. Yet the Egyptians still developed an extensive body of medical knowledge. They observed symptoms. They classified conditions. They experimented with treatments. They passed recipes between generations. And they recorded medical information in texts. The Edwin Smith Surgical Papyrus, for example, contains detailed descriptions of injuries and treatments. Its approach can sometimes feel surprisingly clinical. It describes wounds. It discusses examination. It provides prognosis. It distinguishes between conditions that could be treated, conditions where treatment was uncertain, and conditions considered untreatable. This does not mean ancient Egyptian medicine was modern medicine. It was not. But it shows careful observation and an attempt to organize medical knowledge systematically. The papyrus also contains references to the brain and its relationship to certain injuries. This is particularly interesting because ancient Egyptian medical knowledge was not simply mystical. It included practical anatomical observations. Other medical texts contain treatments for many different conditions. Some remedies involved honey. Honey was valuable not only as food, but also because it has properties that can inhibit the growth of certain microorganisms. Ancient healers did not understand the microbiology behind this. They simply observed that certain substances could be useful. Oil, plant materials, resins, minerals, and other ingredients also appeared in treatments. Some would have been helpful. Some may have done little. Some may have been harmful. Ancient medicine, like medicine in many societies before modern science, was a mixture of experience, tradition, observation, and belief. But the desire to understand the body was unmistakable. and the Egyptians were especially interested in preserving the body after death. This brings us back to the quiet workshops of the embalmers. Imagine a place where skilled workers prepare a body for its journey into the afterlife. The process takes time. The body must be dried, wrapped, protected, placed in a coffin. The wrapping itself could involve enormous amounts of linen. Layers were carefully arranged. Amulets could be placed between layers. Protective texts could accompany the body. The final result was not simply a preserved corpse. It was a carefully prepared identity. The coffin could be decorated with a face. The body could be surrounded by inscriptions. The name could be written repeatedly. The goal was to create an environment in which the deceased could continue to exist. Some wealthy Egyptians had multiple nested coffins. The outer layers could be elaborately decorated. Inside them, the body remained protected. The famous golden mask of Tutankhamun is one of the most recognizable objects from ancient Egypt. Its purpose was connected with the royal burial. The face on the mask presents an idealized image of the young king. It was made primarily of gold and decorated with precious and colored materials. Gold was not simply luxurious. Its durability and resistance to corrosion made it symbolically appropriate for something connected with eternity. The mask represents the face of the king in a way intended to support his identity in the afterlife. Tutankhamun himself became famous in the modern world largely because his tomb was discovered with an extraordinary collection of objects. His reign was relatively brief. He became king as a child. He died while still young. His burial was smaller than the enormous tombs of some earlier rulers. Yet the tomb contained a remarkable collection of goods: furniture, weapons, chariots, jewelry, containers, clothing, ritual objects, and the famous golden mask. The discovery of the tomb in 1922 created enormous excitement around the world. But Tutankhamun was not the most powerful pharaoh Egypt ever produced. His fame today comes largely from the survival and discovery of his burial treasure. This is another lesson in history. The people we remember most are not always the people who were most important in their own time. Sometimes archaeology changes the balance. A minor ruler can become globally famous because his tomb happened to survive relatively intact. A powerful ruler can become less familiar because their monuments were destroyed or their tomb was robbed. Ancient Egypt experienced extensive tomb robbery. Burials containing valuable materials were tempting targets. Even royal tombs were not immune. Over centuries, tombs could be entered and looted. Objects could be removed. Mummies could be disturbed. Names could be erased. For this reason, Egyptian officials sometimes moved royal mummies from their original tombs to hidden caches. One such cache, discovered in the late 19th century, contained the remains of numerous royal individuals. This allowed modern researchers to identify and study some famous pharaohs who might otherwise have been lost. Among the royal mummies studied by modern scientists was Ramesses II. Ramesses the Great was one of Egypt's most famous rulers. His reign lasted approximately 66 years. That is an extraordinarily long reign. Imagine becoming ruler while still relatively young and remaining on the throne for more than 6 decades. During that time, generations would grow old around you. Children would be born who had never known another king. Buildings would be started and completed. Wars would be fought. Diplomatic relationships would change. Ramesses used monumental architecture and inscriptions extensively to project royal power. His name appears on temples and statues across Egypt and Nubia. He also became associated with one of the most famous diplomatic agreements of the ancient world. The treaty between Egypt and the Hittite Empire followed a major conflict between the two powers. The Battle of Kadesh became one of the best-known military events of Ramesses' reign. Egyptian inscriptions present the king heroically, but the surviving evidence from both sides allows historians to reconstruct a more complicated picture. The battle was not a simple, overwhelming Egyptian victory. Instead, it was part of a prolonged struggle between major powers. Eventually, diplomacy became as important as warfare. The Egyptian-Hittite peace treaty is one of the earliest known surviving international peace agreements. Its existence reminds us that ancient diplomacy could involve formal negotiations, mutual commitments, and recognition between powerful states. Ancient rulers did not spend all their time fighting. They exchanged gifts. They sent letters. They arranged marriages. They negotiated borders. They established alliances. They sometimes made peace because continued warfare was too expensive. The world of ancient Egypt was therefore filled with diplomacy as well as monuments. And while kings negotiated with kings, ordinary merchants were moving goods across borders. Trade brought materials that Egypt did not possess locally in sufficient quantities. Timber was especially important. Egypt had limited native forests capable of supplying large quantities of high-quality construction timber. Wood therefore had to be imported. Cedar from the Levant was particularly valuable. It could be used for ships, coffins, furniture, doors, and other important objects. The ability to build large boats was essential to a civilization centered around a major river. Egyptian ships could transport enormous quantities of stone and other materials. The Nile was an incredibly efficient transportation system. Moving heavy objects by water required far less energy than dragging them across land. A massive stone that might be extremely difficult to move over rough ground could be transported much more efficiently on a boat. This is one reason the location of quarries and construction sites mattered. The Egyptians understood their geography. They used the river wherever possible. Some stone traveled from distant quarries to monumental building sites. Granite from Aswan, for example, could be transported northward along the Nile. Granite is extraordinarily hard compared with softer limestone. Working it required skill and durable tools. Yet Egyptian craftsmen shaped enormous granite blocks for temples, obelisks, sarcophagi, and other structures. One of the most spectacular examples is the obelisk. An obelisk is a tall, four-sided stone monument that narrows toward the top and ends in a pyramid-shaped tip. Obelisks were often associated with the sun and could symbolize a ray of sunlight turned into stone. The largest ancient Egyptian obelisks were immense. Some weighed hundreds of tons. The famous unfinished obelisk at Aswan gives us a remarkable glimpse into the construction process because it remains attached to the bedrock. A crack appeared in the stone. The project was abandoned, and the unfinished monument remained in place. It is almost like a frozen moment in the middle of ancient construction. We can look at it today and imagine the workers who were shaping it. They had selected a huge block of stone. They had begun separating it from the surrounding bedrock. They had invested enormous effort. And then something went wrong. The stone cracked. The project stopped. The monument was never completed. Sometimes archaeological evidence becomes powerful precisely because something was left unfinished. A finished monument shows us the final result. An unfinished monument can reveal the process. The same principle applies to ancient quarries. Tool marks remain. Partially cut stones remain. Abandoned blocks remain. These traces allow archaeologists to reconstruct ancient techniques. Workers used stone tools, copper tools, harder stone implements, abrasives, wooden tools, ropes, sledges, and other technologies. The exact methods varied depending on the material and period. Moving heavy stone was not simply a matter of brute strength. Engineers could use ramps, sledges, levers, rollers in some contexts, lubrication, and carefully organized labor. Experiments have shown that wetting sand can reduce friction when pulling heavy sledges. Ancient artwork depicts workers transporting large objects on sledges, including scenes where liquid appears to be poured in front of the sled. The Egyptians may therefore have understood practical friction reduction techniques through experience. Again, they did not need modern physics equations. Observation was enough. If wet sand made a heavy object easier to move, workers could use that knowledge. Ancient engineering was deeply empirical. People tried things. They noticed what worked. They improved techniques. They taught younger workers. And over generations, practical knowledge accumulated. The result was an architectural tradition capable of producing enormous structures. Yet not everything in Egypt was enormous. Many objects were tiny. Small amulets, tiny figurines, small pieces of jewelry, little containers, children's toys, small models placed in tombs. Some of these miniature objects were intended to represent larger activities. In the afterlife, a person might need servants. Rather than burying actual servants, miniature figures known as shabtis or ushabtis could symbolically perform labor. The exact meaning and function of these figures evolved over time. In later periods, large numbers could be placed in tombs. They represented workers who could carry out tasks for the deceased in the afterlife. This reflects a recurring Egyptian idea. The afterlife could resemble an idealized continuation of earthly existence. Food would still matter. Work could still matter. Identity still mattered. Relationships still mattered. The dead needed a place. They needed provisions. They needed protection. They needed their names. The tomb therefore became a kind of bridge between worlds. And the decoration inside the tomb could help provide everything necessary for that continued existence. Paintings might show food production, fishing, hunting, music, dancing, farming, banquets, animals, boats, family members. The scenes were not simply decorative. They could have magical or symbolic significance. If a tomb contained an image of bread, beer, cattle, fish, or grain, the image could symbolically contribute to the deceased's ability to receive those things in the afterlife. Art was therefore more than representation. It could be functional. A painted field could become an eternal field. A painted offering could become an eternal offering. A painted servant could become an eternal servant. This helps explain why Egyptian tomb paintings are often so detailed. They preserve an enormous amount of information about ancient life. We can see clothing, tools, farming methods, musical instruments, boats, animals, furniture, food, and social relationships. Artists worked according to established conventions. Important people were often shown larger than less important figures. This is called hierarchical scale. It was not an attempt to create realistic perspective. Instead, size communicated importance. A king might appear enormous beside ordinary people. A god might appear larger than a king. A high-ranking official might appear larger than workers. The picture was therefore a visual language. Size communicated status. Position communicated relationships. Color could carry meaning. Symbols added additional layers. The artwork was intended to communicate information rather than simply reproduce the world exactly as the eye sees it. And yet Egyptian artists could create extraordinarily realistic details when they wanted to. Animals are often depicted with impressive anatomical accuracy. Birds can be recognizable by species. Plants can be carefully rendered. Fish can be distinguished by shape. This combination of symbolic convention and observational detail makes Egyptian art especially fascinating. A painter could follow strict rules for representing a person while still showing remarkable knowledge of the natural world. The ancient Egyptians also had a sophisticated understanding of color. Mineral pigments could produce reds, yellows, whites, blacks, blues, and greens. Blue was especially valuable. Egyptian blue is often described as the world's first synthetic pigment. It was produced through a carefully controlled process involving silica, copper compounds, calcium, and heat. The resulting material created a beautiful blue color used in art and decorative objects. This is a quiet example of ancient chemical technology. The Egyptians were not chemists in the modern sense. They did not have the periodic table. They did not understand atomic structures. But they could manipulate materials through controlled processes. They knew that heating certain ingredients together could produce useful substances. They knew how to make glass. They produced pigments. They worked metals. They created cosmetics. They made perfumes. They developed adhesives. They used resins. The ancient world was full of chemical experimentation, and cosmetics were not exclusively associated with women. Both men and women in ancient Egypt could use cosmetic products. Eye makeup was especially famous. Dark eye cosmetics, often called kohl, were applied around the eyes. The materials could include compounds based on lead and other minerals. The cosmetics had aesthetic, cultural, and potentially protective purposes. Some ingredients may have helped reduce glare from the sun. Some may have had antimicrobial properties, but certain substances also carried health risks. Ancient people often balanced benefits and dangers without understanding the chemistry involved. Perfumes and scented oils were also important. Egyptian society had access to fragrant plants, resins, oils, and imported materials. Scent could be connected with cleanliness, beauty, ritual, and status. Temple rituals could involve incense. Royal and elite households could use scented oils. The ancient Egyptian world was therefore not simply a world of dust and stone. It was colorful. It smelled of bread, smoke, flowers, incense, animals, river water, perfumed oils, fresh vegetation, and the warm mineral scent of sun-heated stone. It was also filled with sound. The Nile, birds, workmen, markets, animals, music, voices, temple rituals, children playing, boats moving along the water. Imagine standing in a busy Egyptian settlement during the daytime. There would be movement everywhere. People carrying baskets, donkeys moving through streets, boats arriving at the riverbank, merchants exchanging goods, workers transporting materials, children running through narrow spaces, animals being led to market, food being prepared, potters working clay, woodworkers shaping furniture, metal workers producing tools. The modern image of ancient Egypt often focuses on silence. But ancient cities were probably noisy. The Nile Valley supported dense communities. Places such as Memphis and Thebes were major centers of political and religious life. Memphis was located near the beginning of the Nile Delta and served as an important capital during much of Egyptian history. Thebes became especially important during the Middle and New Kingdom periods. Thebes was located much farther south. Today, the remains of Thebes include some of the most famous monuments in Egypt. The modern city of Luxor lies near the ancient site. Across the river is the Western Necropolis. On the eastern side were major temples associated with the living and divine worship. The western side became famous for royal tombs and funerary monuments. The Valley of the Kings is one of the most extraordinary archaeological landscapes in the world. Instead of building huge pyramids for every king, New Kingdom rulers increasingly chose hidden rock-cut tombs in the valley. The location was strategic. The valley was surrounded by cliffs. It was relatively secluded. The tombs could be cut deep into the rock. But secrecy was never perfect. Tomb robbers eventually found many of them. Still, the valley preserved hundreds of years of royal funerary traditions. The tombs could contain long corridors, chambers, decorated ceilings, painted walls, burial chambers. The journey through a tomb could be symbolic. The deceased king traveled through the underworld. He encountered gods and supernatural beings. He passed through gates. He navigated dangerous regions, and ultimately sought rebirth alongside the sun. The walls therefore became a kind of map of the afterlife. Texts such as the Book of the Dead, Book of Gates, Book of Amjuat, and other funerary compositions provided spells, instructions, and descriptions intended to help the deceased navigate the next world. The phrase Book of the Dead can be misleading. It was not a single book with one fixed text. It refers to a collection of funerary spells that could be assembled in different combinations. Different people could possess different selections. Some versions were written on papyrus. Others appeared on tomb walls, coffins, or other objects. The purpose was protection and guidance. The afterlife was imagined as a complex landscape. Knowing the correct names and formulas could matter. Names had power. Words had power. Knowledge had power. A person who knew the name of a gatekeeper could perhaps pass safely. A person who knew the correct spell could protect themselves. This belief in the power of words helps explain why Egyptian inscriptions are so extensive. Writing was not always merely informational. Words could have magical force. The spoken and written name of a deity could participate in the deity's presence. The written name of a deceased person could help preserve their identity. Destroying a person's name could therefore be a powerful act. In some cases, enemies attempted to erase the names and images of rulers from monuments. This practice is often described as damnatio memoriae, although that is a Latin term rather than an Egyptian one. Erasing a name was an attempt to damage someone's memory and status. In Egyptian thought, memory was deeply connected to existence. To be forgotten was frightening. To be remembered was a form of continued life. Perhaps this is why monuments mattered so much. They were not simply buildings. They were memory machines. A temple could preserve the name of a king. A tomb could preserve the name of a family. A statue could preserve someone's appearance. An inscription could preserve words for thousands of years. And now, as our imaginary night journey continues, think about the strange power of that idea. A person living beside the Nile thousands of years ago could never have imagined modern recording technology. They could not take a photograph. They could not record a voice. They could not upload a video. Yet they had their own technology of memory. Stone, papyrus, ink, paint, clay, wood, and sometimes these fragile materials survived far longer than anyone could have expected. The desert helped. Dry conditions can preserve organic materials remarkably well. Papyrus, leather, textiles, wood, and even food can survive in exceptionally dry environments. This is one reason Egypt has provided historians with such an extraordinary archaeological record. In wetter environments, organic materials often decay quickly. In Egypt, dryness can create a natural archive. A piece of papyrus abandoned in the right conditions can survive for thousands of years. A wooden object can remain recognizable. A woven textile can preserve its structure. A loaf of bread can become an archaeological artifact. The desert is harsh for living organisms. But for archaeologists, that harshness can sometimes become a gift. It creates a strange paradox. The same environment that made life difficult helped preserve evidence of the lives that existed there. And perhaps somewhere beneath the sand is an object no one has found yet. A letter. a tool, a forgotten burial, a fragment of writing, a piece of someone's ordinary life. Ancient Egypt is still not completely known. Archaeologists continue to excavate. Researchers continue to reinterpret evidence. New technologies allow scientists to study old discoveries in new ways. Computed tomography can reveal details inside mummies without unwrapping them. Chemical analysis can identify pigments. DNA studies can reveal relationships between ancient individuals. Although the preservation and interpretation of ancient DNA can be challenging, remote sensing can help identify buried structures. Satellite imagery can reveal ancient landscapes. Digital reconstruction can help researchers visualize buildings that no longer survive. The more we learn, the more complicated the ancient world becomes. And that complexity is beautiful, because ancient Egypt was never simply a civilization of mysterious pyramids. It was a living society, a society of farmers and priests, queens and laborers, merchants and soldiers, doctors and fishermen, artists and scribes, children and grandparents, people who believed deeply in their gods, people who worried about food, people who wanted their children to succeed, people who hoped to live comfortably, people who feared death, people who wanted to be remembered, people who watched the stars, and people who stood beside the Nile and watched the sun rise. The sun rises every morning. For us, it is ordinary. For them, it was part of the cosmic order. Every sunrise was another reminder that darkness did not last forever. The sun disappeared, then returned. The world seemed to renew itself. And perhaps that cycle provided a kind of reassurance. Life could continue. The river would return. The crops would grow. The sun would rise. The stars would appear. And the universe, if the proper balance was maintained, would continue. Now imagine the Nile at dawn. Mist hangs lightly above the water. The first birds are beginning to call. The sky is pale. Palm trees appear as silhouettes. A small boat moves slowly through the river. The oars enter the water. Lift. Enter again. Lift. The movement is almost rhythmic enough to become a lullaby. On the shore, someone begins preparing bread. Nearby, a donkey is being loaded. A farmer checks the fields. A child watches the river. A scribe prepares for another day. And somewhere far away, in a royal palace, a ruler wakes beneath painted ceilings. Different people, different lives. One river, one landscape, one ancient civilization. And as the morning light spreads across the valley, the monuments begin to glow. The temples brighten. The pyramids catch the sun. The desert becomes golden. And the ancient world begins another day. For thousands of years, this cycle continued. Day after day, generation after generation. The same river flowing. The same sun rising. But the people changed. Kings changed. Cities changed. Religions evolved. Languages transformed. New buildings replaced old ones. Old temples were expanded. New rulers carved their names beside the names of their predecessors. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, history moved forward. One dynasty became another. One capital rose. Another declined. Foreign armies appeared. Trade routes shifted. New technologies arrived. Yet the Nile remained. And that is perhaps the quietest constant in the entire story. The river remembers nothing. It simply flows. It carried the boats of kings. It carried the boats of farmers. It carried grain, stone, wood, fish, people, messages, and eventually, the stories of a civilization. Tonight, as you listen, let that river become the background to everything. Let its slow movement carry you farther into the past. Past the temples, past the tombs, past the pyramids, past the royal palaces, toward the ordinary homes where people once lived their quiet lives. Because the deeper we travel into ancient Egypt, the more we discover that its greatest mystery is not how the pyramids were built. It is how millions of ordinary human lives created a civilization that lasted for so incredibly long. A civilization is not made only from monuments. It is made from habits, knowledge, family, work, stories, beliefs, food, language, memory. And every morning, when someone woke beside the Nile and began another ordinary day, they were adding one tiny piece to a civilization that would eventually become one of the most famous cultures in human history. So let the night grow quieter. Let the desert cool. Let the stars return. And somewhere beneath those ancient stars, imagine a small Egyptian home beside the river. The day's work is finished. The lamps are fading. The family is resting. The Nile is moving slowly in the darkness. And above them, just as it is above us now, the ancient sky stretches endlessly into the night. The stars do not hurry. The river does not hurry. The desert does not hurry. And neither do we. There is still much more to discover. More stories of pharaohs and queens. More secrets of Egyptian temples. More about ancient Egyptian homes, food, clothing, mathematics, medicine, animals, astronomy, writing, and the mysterious journey into the afterlife. But for now, simply listen to the river and let ancient Egypt drift quietly through your imagination. The Nile continues its slow journey through the darkness. Somewhere beyond the river, the desert is quiet beneath the stars. And as the ancient night stretches on, we can allow ourselves to wander a little deeper into the lives of the people who once called this narrow green valley home. The great monuments are still there in the distance. The pyramids, the temples, the tombs. But tonight, we are going to move away from the largest stones and look more closely at the smaller things. The things that made daily life possible. The things that people touched every day. The things that were carried, eaten, worn, repaired, exchanged, and eventually left behind. Because sometimes the smallest objects tell the most intimate stories. Imagine waking in an ancient Egyptian home. There is no electric alarm, no glowing screen, no mechanical clock beside the bed. Instead, morning arrives naturally. The sky begins to brighten. Birds become louder. The first sounds of activity begin outside. Perhaps the household wakes gradually. Someone prepares food. Someone brings water. Someone begins the day's work. Homes varied enormously depending on wealth, location, and period. Poorer families might live in relatively simple houses constructed from mud brick. Wealthier households could be much larger and more complex. Mud brick was one of the most practical building materials in ancient Egypt. It could be made from mud, water, and organic materials such as straw or other plant fibers. The mixture was formed into bricks and left to dry in the sun. This was an efficient use of local resources. Stone was expensive and labor-intensive. Mud was abundant, and in a dry climate, sun-dried mud brick could remain surprisingly durable. Many ancient Egyptian houses were therefore made primarily from mud brick, while stone was reserved for important monumental buildings and certain structural elements. This difference tells us something important about ancient priorities. The pyramids were made of stone because they were intended to last. Ordinary houses did not necessarily need to last thousands of years. A family needed shelter. A temple needed permanence. Different purposes required different materials. Inside a typical home, furniture could be relatively simple. Stools were common. Beds could be made of wooden frames with woven surfaces. Chests provided storage. Small tables could hold food or household objects. Mats were used on floors. Some people slept on raised beds, while others may have slept on simpler surfaces. Wood was valuable because good timber was not abundant in Egypt. Imported wood could therefore be expensive. Furniture belonging to wealthy people could be beautifully crafted and decorated. Some surviving Egyptian furniture demonstrates remarkable woodworking skills. Joinery techniques could be sophisticated. Wood could be carved, painted, inlaid, covered with gold, decorated with ivory or colored materials. The famous furniture from Tutankhamun's tomb provides an extraordinary example of the skill Egyptian craftsmen could achieve. But ordinary households were much simpler. A person did not need a golden chair to sit down. A wooden stool was enough. And this is another useful reminder. Ancient Egyptian society was highly unequal. The king lived differently from a farmer. A wealthy official lived differently from a laborer. A temple administrator had access to resources that an ordinary family did not. The ancient world had social hierarchies just as modern societies do, although the structures were different. At the top stood the royal family and elite officials. Below them were administrators, priests, soldiers, scribes, craftsmen, merchants, farmers, laborers, and many others. These categories were not always fixed. A person's position could depend on family, education, occupation, wealth, and connections. Education could provide opportunities. A child who became a scribe might enter a different social world than a child who remained a farmer. Writing was a specialized skill. It required years of learning. Young students practiced signs repeatedly. They copied texts. They learned vocabulary. They studied mathematics. They learned how to prepare documents. Some surviving school exercises contain mistakes and corrections. These tiny traces provide a glimpse of ancient students learning much as students do today. A young person sitting with a writing surface, trying to remember a difficult sign, copying the same passage again, making an error, receiving correction, practicing until the writing becomes smoother. Education was not necessarily easy. Scribal training could be demanding. Ancient texts sometimes praised the life of a scribe while criticizing manual labor. These texts were partly propaganda for the profession. They presented writing as comfortable compared with difficult physical work. A scribe could work indoors. A farmer had to work under the sun. A fisherman had to deal with the river. A laborer had to carry heavy loads. The texts naturally reflected the perspective of people who valued literacy. In reality, scribal work had its own demands. A scribe had to maintain accuracy. Administrative mistakes could have consequences. Numbers mattered. Names mattered. Quantities mattered. A missing entry could create confusion. An incorrect measurement could affect taxes or supplies. Writing was therefore both an intellectual and administrative technology. And paper was not cheap. Papyrus had to be processed. The inner fibers of the papyrus plant were cut into strips and arranged in layers. The strips were pressed together. The plant's natural sap helped bind them. After drying and smoothing, the resulting material could be written upon. Papyrus sheets could be joined into long rolls. Some surviving rolls are several meters long. Others were much shorter. The amount of writing preserved depends partly on what happened to the document after it was used. Some papyri were deliberately stored. Others were discarded. Some were reused. A document could have a second life. Old writing material could be repurposed. A text might be written on one side, while another document appeared on the reverse. Ancient writing surfaces were valuable enough to encourage reuse. Ink itself was made from carefully prepared materials. Black ink commonly used carbon-based material. Red ink could be made using mineral pigments. Different colors could serve different functions. Red might highlight important words, headings, or warnings. Black could be used for the main text. This created an early form of visual organization. A reader could identify sections by color. The ancient Egyptians were therefore thinking not only about what they wrote, but how readers would navigate the writing. The written page was already becoming a designed object, and some documents were beautifully illustrated. Funerary papyri could include images of gods, the deceased, judgment scenes, and the journey through the afterlife. Text and image worked together. The pictures were not simply decoration. They helped communicate the meaning of the spells. They created a visual guide to the world beyond death. One of the most famous scenes shows the weighing of the heart. The deceased stands before divine figures. A balance is prepared. The heart is placed on one side. The feather of Ma'at is placed on the other. Nearby may stand Anubis, associated with embalming and the protection of the dead. Thoth, the ibis-headed god associated with writing and knowledge, may record the result. If the heart is found to be in balance, the deceased can proceed. If not, the consequences are severe. A creature known as Ammit, often depicted with features of a crocodile, lion, and hippopotamus, waits nearby. Ammit is sometimes called the devourer of the dead. The image transforms morality into a dramatic cosmic ceremony, but it also reveals how the Egyptians connected ethics with balance. A good life was not simply about following rules for their own sake. It was about maintaining harmony. Ma'at was the principle that made the universe function correctly. A just ruler maintained Ma'at. A dishonest official disrupted it. A truthful person supported it. A violent act could disturb it. The entire society was ideally organized around preserving order. This concept had political consequences. The king was expected to maintain Ma'at. That meant defending Egypt, supporting temples, performing rituals, ensuring justice, maintaining stability, and presenting himself as a protector of the established order. Royal inscriptions often portray the king as defeating enemies and restoring order. Enemies could be associated symbolically with chaos. The king stood for stability. This was partly religious symbolism, but it also served as political messaging. A ruler who maintained order was legitimate. A ruler who failed could be viewed as dangerous. The ancient Egyptian concept of kingship therefore combined religion, politics, and cosmic order. The king was not simply a politician. He was a central figure in the relationship between humans and gods. But the king was still a human being. He could become ill. He could age. He could die. And his death required elaborate preparation. The death of a pharaoh was not only a personal event. It was a political transition. A new ruler needed to take the throne. The continuation of kingship was itself a symbol of stability. The death of one king was therefore followed by ceremonies establishing the next. The new ruler inherited responsibilities, titles, wealth, temples, military forces, and political challenges. Some successions were peaceful. Others were complicated. Egyptian history contains disputes over succession, rival claimants, short reigns, and powerful queens. Women could occupy important positions in royal politics. Some queens became highly influential. A few women ruled Egypt directly as pharaoh. The most famous example is Hatshepsut. Hatshepsut became king during the 18th dynasty. Rather than simply serving as a temporary caretaker, she adopted the full royal titulary and was represented in traditional kingly forms. Her monuments show her wearing the symbols of kingship. This was not simply a matter of pretending to be male. Egyptian kingship itself was strongly associated with masculine imagery, and Hatshepsut adopted the visual language expected of a king. She ruled for many years and oversaw significant building projects. Her mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahari is one of the most elegant monuments in Egypt. It rises in terraces against a dramatic cliff. The architecture blends naturally with the surrounding landscape. Long horizontal terraces lead toward the rock face. Columns create repeating patterns. Reliefs depict religious ceremonies and an expedition to the land of Punt. Punt was a distant region whose exact location remains debated, although it was probably somewhere in the Horn of Africa or nearby regions. Egyptians valued goods obtained from Punt. These included aromatic resins, ebony, exotic animals, and other valuable materials. Hatshepsut's reliefs show ships returning from the expedition loaded with products. Among the most famous images are representations of incense trees. These trees were prized because their aromatic resins could be used in religious rituals and perfumes. The expedition demonstrates that ancient Egyptians were capable of long-distance maritime trade. They were not confined to the Nile. They could organize ships, crews, supplies, and diplomatic or commercial missions across the Red Sea region. The ancient world was more connected than it can sometimes appear. Goods traveled long distances. Ideas traveled with them. Plants could be transported. Animals could be transported. People could travel. And luxury objects could cross deserts and seas. One of the most beautiful things about ancient trade is that it created unexpected connections between distant landscapes. A blue stone from Central Asia could end up in an Egyptian necklace. A tree from a distant region could be planted in Egypt. Timber from the Levant could become a royal coffin. Gold from Nubia could become a royal ornament. A foreign animal could appear in a royal procession. A plant that grew far away could become part of an Egyptian temple ritual. The ancient world was already global in ways that are easy to underestimate. Of course, travel was slow. Communication was slow. A journey that takes hours today might have taken weeks or months. But the desire to obtain distant resources was powerful, and rivers and seas made movement possible. Ships were especially important. Egyptian boats could be designed for different purposes. Some were used for river transportation. Others were constructed for longer journeys. Royal boats could be highly elaborate. The burial of Khufu included a large wooden boat that was discovered near the Great Pyramid. It was reconstructed and displayed as a remarkable example of ancient shipbuilding. The boat was built using cedar and other materials. Its construction shows advanced woodworking. Planks were joined together without modern metal fasteners. The ancient shipwrights relied on sophisticated joinery techniques. This was an enormous engineering achievement. A boat had to withstand water. It had to remain structurally stable. It had to carry people or cargo, and it had to be reparable. The Nile made boats essential to everyday life. A person living near the river could often travel more easily by boat than overland. The river became a transportation network connecting communities. Goods could be moved efficiently. Messages could travel. Government officials could travel. Military forces could be transported. Religious processions could move along the river. The Nile was therefore the bloodstream of the civilization, and its direction created a natural division in Egyptian geography. The river flows generally from south to north. The sea lies to the north. The land rises toward the south. This produced a simple geographical language. Upper Egypt was in the south. Lower Egypt was in the north, especially the Nile Delta. The names can initially seem backward to modern readers, but the distinction is based on elevation and the direction of the river. Upper Egypt is upstream. Lower Egypt is downstream. The two regions had distinct identities. Egyptian kings often wore the combined symbols of Upper and Lower Egypt. The famous double crown represented the unification of the two lands. This idea of unity was central to Egyptian kingship. Egypt's political history began with the eventual unification of Upper and Lower Egypt, traditionally associated with a ruler often called Narmer or Menes. The exact historical details remain debated, but by the early dynastic period, a unified Egyptian state had emerged. The Narmer palette provides one of the most famous early representations of royal power. The ruler is shown wearing different crowns associated with Upper and Lower Egypt. The imagery emphasizes conquest and unification. The palette is more than a simple historical photograph. It is symbolic art, but it reveals the importance of the idea that the king had united the two lands. The unified kingdom became one of the world's earliest large territorial states. And from that point, the story of dynastic Egypt unfolded over thousands of years. The Old Kingdom became famous for pyramid construction. The Middle Kingdom saw political reunification and cultural development. The New Kingdom became an age of imperial expansion, monumental temples, and powerful pharaohs. Between these periods were times of political fragmentation known as intermediate periods. These were not simply eras of complete collapse. Regional rulers could remain powerful. Cultural traditions continued. Trade continued. People continued to farm. Temples continued to operate. But political authority became more divided. This is important because ancient civilizations did not move smoothly upward from primitive beginnings to greatness. History is rarely a straight line. Kingdoms grow. They weaken. They divide. They reunify. Foreign powers arrive. Local leaders resist. New institutions appear. Old traditions survive. The ancient Egyptian civilization experienced all of these changes. And yet, through much of its history, people continued to identify themselves with traditions that reached far into the past. This continuity is one of the most remarkable aspects of Egypt. A person living in a later period could look at a monument built more than 1,000 years earlier and still recognize its religious significance. Old gods remained relevant. Ancient temples were restored. Old texts were copied. Old royal titles continued. This created an extraordinary cultural memory. Imagine walking through Egypt during the New Kingdom and seeing monuments that were already ancient. The pyramids at Giza would have been old. The temples of earlier kings would have been old. The names of rulers from centuries earlier would have been part of the cultural landscape. Ancient Egypt was therefore a civilization living among its own deep history. People could physically encounter the past. The past was not hidden inside books. It stood on the horizon. It was carved into walls. It was embedded in the landscape. It was part of daily life. This may have influenced Egyptian attitudes toward tradition. The past was powerful because it had already endured. To preserve ancient forms was to connect the present with something proven to be stable. Yet change still happened. One of the most dramatic examples came during the reign of Akhenaten. Akhenaten attempted to transform Egyptian religious practice by elevating the Aten, the visible solar disk, above traditional gods. He moved the royal court to a new capital called Akhetaten, now known as Amarna. The art of this period is strikingly different from traditional Egyptian royal art. The king and his family were sometimes shown with elongated heads, narrow faces, fuller bodies, and unusual physical features. The royal family was depicted in intimate scenes. Akhenaten and his wife Nefertiti could be shown with their daughters. The Aten's rays extend downward toward the royal family, sometimes ending in hands offering the symbol of life. This artistic style is unlike much of the earlier royal imagery. For a short period, Egypt underwent a major religious and cultural transformation. But after Akhenaten's death, much of the change was reversed. The traditional gods returned to prominence. The city of Akhetaten was abandoned. The names of Akhenaten and some of his successors were later removed or damaged. His experiment did not permanently replace Egypt's traditional religious system. Yet it left behind one of the most fascinating chapters in Egyptian history. And it reminds us that even a civilization famous for continuity could experience radical change. Nefertiti herself remains one of the most recognizable figures from ancient Egypt because of her famous painted limestone bust. The sculpture shows an elegant face with a tall blue crown. The bust is remarkably refined, but it is also a reminder of how much of ancient Egypt survives through the choices of preservation. Millions of people lived in Egypt. Only a fraction of their objects survived. Only a fraction of those have been excavated, and only a fraction of those have become famous. The famous pieces can sometimes distort our understanding. We remember the Golden Mask, the bust of Nefertiti, the Great Sphinx, the pyramids, but most ancient Egyptians never owned anything like them. Their lives were filled with ordinary materials: clay pots, wooden tools, simple clothing, stone implements, food baskets, fishing equipment, household objects. And these humble things can be more representative of ancient life than royal treasures. Pottery was especially important. Clay was abundant. Potters could shape containers for storage, cooking, serving, and transport. Some vessels were plain. Others were decorated. Different periods had distinctive styles. Pottery fragments are among the most common archaeological discoveries because ceramics survive so well. A broken pot may seem insignificant, but archaeologists can learn a great deal from it. Its shape can indicate its function. Its clay can reveal where it was produced. Its decoration can suggest cultural influences. Residue inside the vessel can sometimes reveal what it contained. A simple piece of pottery can therefore become a clue in a much larger historical puzzle. The same is true of seeds and plant remains. Archaeobotany allows researchers to study ancient crops. Wheat and barley were central. Flax was important for producing linen. Dates, grapes, figs, onions, garlic, legumes, and other plants could contribute to the diet. Linen was the primary textile of ancient Egypt. It was made from flax. The quality of linen could vary. Fine linen could be extremely delicate. Royal and elite clothing could be beautifully woven. Ordinary workers might wear simpler garments. The hot climate made lightweight linen practical. Clothing styles were generally simple compared with modern wardrobes. But jewelry could add color and status. Beads, necklaces, bracelets, rings, amulets, head ornaments. The combination of plain linen and colorful jewelry could create an elegant appearance. Egyptian beauty ideals emphasized cleanliness, grooming, and presentation. Hair could be styled in elaborate ways. Wigs were commonly used, especially among elites. Wigs had practical and social functions. They could protect the head from sunlight. They could be styled according to fashion. They could also help maintain elaborate appearances. Some people shaved their heads and wore wigs. Others kept their natural hair. Hair was part of personal identity, and grooming extended beyond hair. Ancient Egyptians used razors. They used oils. They used perfumes. They used cosmetic preparations. They cared about appearance. This should not be surprising. Human beings have cared about grooming for an extraordinarily long time. The desire to look presentable is not a modern invention. Ancient Egyptian tombs contain mirrors, cosmetic containers, combs, razors, and other grooming tools. Mirrors were often made from polished copper or bronze. They could provide a reflective surface. Imagine holding one in the sunlight. It would not produce the perfectly clear reflection of a modern glass mirror, but it was still enough to see the face. A person could arrange their hair, apply cosmetics, check their appearance. A simple polished piece of metal became a personal technology. And perhaps someone thousands of years ago looked into such a mirror and wondered whether they looked ready for the day. That small moment connects us across time. Because beneath all the monumental history, ancient Egyptians were still people. They had mornings when they felt tired, days when work went well, days when work went badly, moments of excitement, moments of grief. They celebrated births. They mourned deaths. They formed friendships. They fell in love. They argued. They reconciled. They hoped. They feared. They dreamed. And perhaps they sometimes lay awake at night, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds outside, wondering about tomorrow. The human mind has not changed as completely as the world around it. And now, as our journey through ancient Egypt continues, the night becomes deeper. The river reflects the moon. The temples become silhouettes. The desert grows cold. The stars become brighter. Somewhere in the darkness, a jackal moves along the edge of the settlement. In the ancient imagination, the jackal could evoke Anubis, guardian of the dead. But in reality, the animal is simply moving through the landscape, looking for food, following a scent, searching the darkness. Animals were everywhere. Cattle, goats, sheep, donkeys, dogs, cats, birds, fish, crocodiles, hippopotamuses, wild desert animals. Some were domesticated, others were hunted, some were feared, others were admired. Animals also became companions. Dogs could serve as hunting animals, guards, or household companions. Cats could control pests and live alongside families. Donkeys were extraordinarily useful for transportation. Before widespread use of wheeled carts for everyday transport, donkeys provided an efficient way to carry goods over land. They could survive relatively harsh conditions. They were smaller than horses, but extremely useful. Horses arrived in Egypt later than donkeys and became especially important during the New Kingdom. The horse was associated with chariot warfare and royal prestige. Chariots transformed military mobility. A trained horse could pull a lightweight chariot at speed. An archer could shoot from the moving platform. Kings could appear in battle as highly mobile warriors. But chariots were expensive. They required horses, equipment, training, and skilled drivers. They were therefore associated with elites and military forces. The introduction of the horse and chariot helped Egypt project military power beyond the Nile Valley. During the New Kingdom, Egypt became an imperial power. Its influence extended into Nubia and parts of the Levant. Egyptian armies campaigned beyond the traditional borders. Fortresses were built. Garrisons were established. Tribute was collected. Foreign princes negotiated with the pharaoh. The empire brought wealth, but also created new challenges. Long-distance campaigns required supplies. Soldiers had to travel. Horses had to be fed. Weapons had to be maintained. Fortresses had to be supplied. Foreign populations had to be governed. The empire therefore depended on administration as much as military strength. And military technology evolved. Egyptian armies used bows, spears, axes, shields, and later more sophisticated weapons. Composite bows became particularly important. They could provide greater power than simple bows, but were more complex to manufacture. They used different materials laminated together. The combination produced a powerful weapon suitable for warfare. Egyptian soldiers also used shields for protection. Armor existed, although it was not necessarily worn by every soldier. Military campaigns could be dangerous. Egyptian inscriptions often glorify victories. But behind every victory were exhausted soldiers, wounded men, logistical problems, and difficult journeys. The ancient world was not romantic for everyone. War could destroy communities. Captives could be taken. Cities could be damaged. People could be displaced. The Egyptian state, like other ancient states, could be both highly organized and deeply violent. Yet peace was often the goal because stable agriculture and trade generated wealth. A successful harvest was more useful to a kingdom than a permanently damaged field. A functioning trade network generated more resources than a destroyed marketplace. Political stability therefore mattered. And once again, the concept of Ma'at appears. Order, balance, continuity. The ideal Egyptian state was one in which the world remained properly arranged. The river flowed. The fields produced. The temples operated. The king ruled. The gods were honored. The dead were protected. The living were fed. And the sun continued its journey. Now let the image become softer. The armies are far away. The temples are quiet. The markets have closed. The boats have been tied to the shore. The workers have gone home. The lamps are burning low. The Nile moves gently beneath the moonlight. A few stars are reflected on its surface. And in a small room beside the river, someone is preparing to sleep. There is nothing monumental about this moment. No pyramid. No golden mask. No royal procession. Just a person ending an ordinary day. Perhaps they whisper a prayer. Perhaps they think about tomorrow's work. Perhaps they hear the river outside. Perhaps they fall asleep while the stars continue shining above the desert. And thousands of years later, we are still here, listening to the same sky. The civilization has become history. The people have become names in books. The buildings have become archaeological sites. But the river remains. The stars remain. And the quiet rhythm of night remains. So let yourself drift a little deeper. There is still more waiting beyond the darkness. More about Egyptian gods. More about the mysterious pyramids. More about the Great Sphinx. More about royal women. More about ancient Egyptian mathematics and astronomy. More about the strange creatures that lived beside the Nile. More about mummies and tombs. More about the everyday meals people ate. More about ancient celebrations. More about love, family, childhood, work, and death. And eventually, we will follow the ancient Egyptian imagination all the way into the afterlife itself. But for now, stay beside the river. Listen to the gentle movement of water. Feel the cool desert air. Watch the stars. And let the ancient world become quieter and quieter. The Nile flows. The stars shine. The desert sleeps. And ancient Egypt rests beneath the night. The desert sleeps beneath the stars. The Nile continues to move quietly through the darkness, carrying reflections of the moon along its surface. And somewhere along its banks, ancient Egypt is becoming still. But there was a time when this landscape was not quiet at all. There were celebrations, processions, markets, boats, music, drums, voices, children laughing, animals moving through crowded streets, and the occasional sound of a temple festival reaching far beyond the sacred walls. Ancient Egyptian life was not always solemn. The civilization that built tombs and monuments also knew how to celebrate. Festivals were important parts of the calendar. They brought together religion, community, food, music, and movement. Some festivals honored specific gods. Others were connected with the king. Some involved processions in which divine images were carried from one part of a temple complex to another. Crowds could gather to watch. People might receive food and drink. Musicians could perform. Dancers could participate. The boundaries between religious ceremony and public celebration could become wonderfully blurred. One of the important festivals was associated with Opet. During the Opet festival, the divine forms of Ammonius, Mut, and Khonsu were carried in procession between Karnak and Luxor. The exact rituals changed over time, but the festival was strongly connected with renewal and kingship. Imagine the scene. The river valley is bright beneath the sun. Crowds have gathered. Banners move above them. Musicians play. People shout. priests carry a sacred bark. The royal presence is emphasized. The gods are being brought into the world of the people. For a society in which divine images were normally kept within restricted temple spaces, these public processions could be extraordinary. The sacred was temporarily visible. People could participate in the celebration. The festival reinforced the relationship between gods, king, and population. Music played an important role. Ancient Egyptian musicians used many instruments. Harps could be large or small. Flutes could produce soft tones. Drums created rhythm. Sistra, small rattling instruments, were particularly associated with religious ceremonies. The sound of the sistrum became strongly connected with goddesses such as Hathor. Hathor was one of the most widely revered Egyptian deities. She was associated with love, music, motherhood, beauty, joy, fertility, and the sky. Her worship could take many forms. She could be represented as a woman, a cow, or a woman wearing a headdress incorporating cow horns and a solar disk. Hathor was also associated with welcoming the dead into the afterlife. Her many roles reflect something important about Egyptian religion. A deity could represent multiple aspects of life. The ancient Egyptians did not always divide existence into neat categories. Love could be religious. Music could be religious. Motherhood could be religious. Death could be religious. Agriculture could be religious. The same deity could be connected with several areas of life. Another important deity was Isis. Isis became one of the most enduring figures in Egyptian religion. She was associated with motherhood, magic, healing, protection, and kingship. Her story involving Osiris and Horus became one of the most important mythological traditions in Egypt. Osiris was associated with the dead and the afterlife. According to the famous myth, Osiris was killed by his brother Seth. Isis searched for Osiris and helped restore his body. Their son Horus later became associated with kingship and battled Seth. The myth contains themes of death, restoration, family, conflict, legitimacy, and renewal. Osiris became one of the most important deities associated with the afterlife. His story helped provide a model for the hope that death could be followed by regeneration. This was deeply comforting. If Osiris could die and return to existence, perhaps human beings could also hope for continued life. The Egyptian afterlife was not necessarily a simple heaven floating above the world. It could be imagined as a landscape. There were fields, rivers, gates, deities, dangers, and regions that required knowledge. The field of reeds, often called Aru, was imagined as an idealized realm where the deceased could live peacefully. It could resemble the best parts of earthly existence. Fields would be fertile, food would be abundant. The deceased could continue familiar activities. This vision was very different from some later religious concepts of an entirely spiritual paradise. For many Egyptians, the ideal afterlife retained physical qualities. The body mattered. Food mattered. The landscape mattered. Identity mattered. This is why tombs could contain food, furniture, clothing, jewelry, tools, and other objects. The deceased needed an environment in which their existence could continue. The idea of continued physical existence also explains why the preservation of the body was so important. The ancient Egyptians did not all share identical beliefs, and those beliefs changed over time. But the general concern with preserving identity was persistent. The name, the body, the spirit, the tomb, the offerings, all could contribute to continued existence. Egyptian concepts of the soul were complex. Different terms described different aspects of a person's being. The Ka was associated with life force and the ability to receive offerings. The ba was often represented as a human-headed bird and could move between the tomb and the outside world. The ak represented a transformed and effective spirit. These concepts do not map perfectly onto modern ideas of body and soul. They were part of a much more complex understanding of personhood. A human being was not simply one thing. Different aspects of identity had to remain connected. The tomb therefore became a meeting point. The body rested there. The name was written there. Offerings could be provided there. The ba could return there. The ka could receive nourishment. The deceased remained connected to the living world. This is one reason offering rituals mattered so much. Food could be presented to the dead. Bread, beer, meat, fruit, vegetables, flowers, incense. The offerings were symbolic, but they also represented the continuing relationship between families and their deceased relatives. The dead were not simply forgotten. Families could visit tombs. They could speak to the deceased. They could leave offerings. They could remember their ancestors. The boundary between the living and the dead was therefore not imagined as completely closed. The dead remained part of the family, and this connection could last for generations. A tomb might contain inscriptions requesting future visitors to speak the deceased person's name. A stranger reading the name could, in a sense, help preserve the person's existence. That is an extraordinary idea. Imagine walking through a cemetery thousands of years later and saying someone's name aloud. For the ancient Egyptian, that simple act could have deep significance. The person might have been dead for centuries. Their family might have disappeared. Their home might have vanished. But their name remained. And now someone had spoken it. Memory had crossed thousands of years. This is perhaps one of the most moving aspects of Egyptian inscriptions. Many were designed specifically to resist forgetting. Stone was chosen because it could endure. Words were carved deeply. Images were painted. Names were repeated. The tomb was meant to preserve identity against time. Yet time eventually wins. Even stone erodes. Paint fades. Temples collapse. Languages become forgotten. And for centuries, ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs became unreadable to most people. The knowledge of how to read them was lost. Then, in the 19th century, the decipherment of the Rosetta Stone helped unlock the ancient writing system. The Rosetta Stone was created during the Ptolemaic period. It contains the same decree written in 3 scripts: hieroglyphic, Demotic, and Greek. Because scholars could already read Greek, the stone provided a crucial key. Jean-François Champollion played a central role in deciphering Egyptian hieroglyphs. He recognized that hieroglyphs could represent sounds as well as ideas. This was a major breakthrough. Once the writing system could be read again, thousands of inscriptions became accessible. Suddenly, the walls of temples could speak. Names could be identified. Religious texts could be translated. Administrative documents could be understood. Personal letters could be read. Egyptian history expanded dramatically. A civilization that had become silent began speaking again. And yet hieroglyphs are more than a writing system. They are visually beautiful. Signs depict animals, objects, body parts, plants, and geometric forms. But beneath the images is a sophisticated system of phonetic and semantic signs. A bird might represent a sound rather than simply the bird itself. A symbol could function as a determinative, helping clarify the meaning of a word. The writing system could therefore combine pictures, sounds, and categories. It was not simply a picture language. This is a common misunderstanding. If you see a bird in a hieroglyphic inscription, it does not necessarily mean the text is talking about a bird. The bird could represent a sound. The surrounding signs determine the meaning. Ancient Egyptian writing could express complex ideas, and scribes became highly skilled at arranging signs. On monumental inscriptions, the signs were carefully balanced within the available space. The visual appearance mattered. Writing was both language and design. Some inscriptions can be read in different directions depending on where the figures face. You can often determine the reading direction by looking at the orientation of human or animal figures. They generally face toward the beginning of the text. This makes hieroglyphic inscriptions feel almost like visual pathways. The writing guides your eye. And because hieroglyphs were often carved or painted in sacred contexts, the writing itself became part of the architecture. Imagine entering a temple. Every wall is covered in symbols. The king appears before a deity. The deity holds an ankh, the symbol commonly associated with life. Rows of signs surround the figures. Names are repeated. Titles are displayed. Offerings are listed. Prayers are preserved. The entire building becomes a written world. And the signs are not simply describing the temple. They are helping define its sacred identity. The ancient Egyptians also developed a rich tradition of literature. Stories, teachings, love poems, hymns, and wisdom texts survive. Some are surprisingly personal. Love poetry from ancient Egypt can be sensual and emotional. It describes longing, beauty, desire, separation, affection. The existence of such poetry reminds us that ancient people experienced romantic feelings much as people do today. A person could admire someone's hair, miss someone's presence, think about their voice, remember their touch, long for their company. Thousands of years separate us from these poems, yet the emotions are familiar. Ancient Egyptian literature also included wisdom texts offering advice about behavior, social relationships, work, and reputation. Some texts advise young people to listen to elders. Others discuss how to behave in public. Some praise patience. Others warn against anger. These writings reveal concerns about social order and personal character. Parents wanted children to behave properly. Teachers wanted students to learn. Officials wanted subordinates to be respectful. People wanted reputations. These are not uniquely modern concerns. Human society has always required cooperation. And cooperation requires expectations. The ancient Egyptians had strong ideas about proper behavior. Respect for parents was important. Respect for social hierarchy was important. Honesty was valued. Excessive greed was criticized. Anger could be dangerous. A person's reputation mattered. The wisdom literature sometimes presents life as a process of learning self-control. A person who speaks too quickly can create trouble. A person who becomes angry can lose judgment. A person who listens carefully can avoid mistakes. These lessons could have been written thousands of years ago, but they still sound strangely familiar. The ancient Egyptians also had humor. Although humor is difficult to preserve archaeologically, some surviving texts and images suggest that people enjoyed jokes, satire, and playful scenes. One famous literary work, The Tale of the Shipwrecked Sailor, tells a story about a sailor who survives a shipwreck and encounters a giant serpent on a mysterious island. The serpent speaks. The story becomes a tale of danger, survival, and fate. Another famous text, The Tale of Sinew, follows a man who leaves Egypt, lives abroad, and eventually returns. It explores identity, exile, loyalty, and longing for home. Sinew's story is especially interesting because it reveals a deep emotional attachment to Egypt. Home was not simply a geographical location. It was part of identity. The Nile, the language, the customs, the king, the gods, the landscape, all could contribute to the feeling of belonging. Imagine leaving Egypt and traveling far away. The desert disappears behind you. The Nile becomes distant. The familiar landscape is gone. Perhaps years pass. You build a new life. But somewhere in your memory remains the river valley where you grew up. The desire to return home is ancient. The same emotion appears in literature across thousands of years. Ancient Egyptian poetry could also celebrate nature. The Nile, flowers, birds, gardens, trees. The Egyptians created gardens around temples and wealthy homes. Trees provided shade. Pools reflected the sky. Plants could be grown for food, beauty, medicine, or ritual use. A garden beside a large house could provide a cooler environment during hot days. Imagine walking through such a garden in the morning. Palm trees rise overhead. Lotus flowers float on water. Birds move among branches. The air is cooler near the pool. The smell of flowers mixes with the smell of wet earth. Gardens could be carefully designed. Water was precious. Creating a garden required planning. The presence of a garden therefore signaled wealth and status. The lotus flower had important symbolic associations. It emerged from water and opened toward the sunlight. Its daily cycle made it a natural symbol of rebirth. The Egyptians connected lotus imagery with creation and renewal. Flowers were also used in funerary and religious contexts. Wreaths and garlands could accompany burials. Flowers could be placed around statues. Plants connected life, death, and renewal. The natural world was constantly providing symbols. The rising sun, the returning river, the opening flower, the scarab beetle, the falcon, the lotus, the papyrus, the desert. Nature and religion were deeply intertwined. The Egyptian landscape itself became a sacred text. The river represented fertility. The desert represented dryness and danger. The eastern horizon represented sunrise. The western horizon represented sunset and the realm of the dead. The sky was the domain of gods and celestial bodies. The earth was associated with Geb, the sky goddess. Nut was often depicted arching her body over the world. According to Egyptian mythology, Nut swallowed the sun each evening and gave birth to it again each morning. The image transforms the daily cycle of sunset and sunrise into a cosmic story of death and rebirth. Imagine the sun disappearing. Darkness arrives, but the sun is not destroyed. It travels through the underworld. Then it is born again. The universe renews itself. This pattern echoes through Egyptian mythology. Death is not necessarily final. Transformation is possible. The ancient Egyptians lived in a world where cycles were everywhere. The Nile flooded and receded. Crops grew and were harvested. The moon changed shape. The sun disappeared and returned. Plants died and grew again. Animals reproduced. Children became adults. People died. The natural world seemed to suggest that life was constantly moving through cycles. The afterlife was therefore easier to imagine as continuation rather than complete disappearance. And the rituals surrounding death were designed to support that continuation. One of the most important rituals was the opening of the mouth ceremony. It was performed on statues or mummies of the deceased. The ritual symbolically restored the person's ability to breathe, speak, see, hear, and eat in the afterlife. The name itself tells us how important the mouth was. A person needed to speak. They needed to receive food. They needed to communicate. They needed to participate in existence. The ceremony therefore transformed the preserved body into a functioning being. It was a symbolic reanimation. The mummy was not simply preserved. It was prepared for another life. And this idea helps explain why the Egyptians invested so much effort into funerary ritual. Death was a transition. The person was moving from one state of existence into another. The tomb was a doorway. The rituals were instructions. The amulets were protection. The texts were guidance. The preserved body was the physical anchor. The name was the identity. and the offerings connected the dead with the living. Everything worked together. The Egyptians also believed that certain objects could possess protective power. Amulets could be shaped like the Eye of Horus, the Ankh, the Scarab, the Jed pillar, various gods and goddesses. The Eye of Horus became one of the most recognizable symbols of ancient Egypt. It was associated with protection, healing, and restoration. According to mythology, Horus lost an eye during his conflict with Seth. The eye was restored. It therefore became a symbol of healing and wholeness. The image was used on jewelry, coffins, funerary objects, and other items. The Jed pillar was associated with stability and the backbone of Osiris. Its repeated vertical structure represented endurance. Again, Egyptian symbols often contained multiple layers of meaning. A small object could represent an entire story, and that story could accompany a person throughout life and into death. Amulets were not necessarily reserved for the wealthy. Many people wore protective objects. Some were buried with them. The belief in protection was widespread. A small carved object could be carried close to the body. Perhaps it was worn around the neck. Perhaps it was attached to clothing. Perhaps it was placed with a child. The object could provide reassurance. Human beings have always carried things that make them feel safe. Modern people might carry lucky objects, photographs, jewelry, or religious symbols. Ancient Egyptians had their own versions. The materials were different. The beliefs were different. But the emotional function could be surprisingly similar. It is easy to imagine a person touching an amulet before beginning a difficult journey. The object was small, but its meaning was enormous. And journeys could be dangerous. Traveling across Egypt was not always easy. The Nile provided transportation, but deserts still had to be crossed. Roads could be rough. Bandits could be a threat. Wild animals existed. Heat could be severe. Water was essential. Travelers needed supplies. Military expeditions required enormous logistical planning. Merchants carried valuable goods. Officials traveled between administrative centers. Pilgrims visited temples. The river made much of this movement possible. Boats could travel with the current. Sailing north could be assisted by the river's flow. Traveling south could take advantage of prevailing winds. This created a natural combination. Sail south, drift north. The exact conditions varied, but the principle was fundamental. The Nile was both a waterway and a wind corridor. Egyptian boats often used sails when winds were favorable. The sight of a large sailing vessel moving along the river would have been familiar. The mast rises. The sail catches the wind. The boat glides. The shoreline moves slowly past. Palm trees, fields, villages, temples, desert cliffs, everything reflected in the water. The river made the enormous kingdom feel connected. And perhaps that is why the Nile appears so frequently in Egyptian imagery. It was impossible to separate Egyptian life from the river. Even the calendar was connected to its behavior. The traditional Egyptian agricultural year was divided into 3 seasons. Ake was the inundation season. Paret was the season of emergence or growth. Shimu was the harvest season. The names themselves reveal how closely time was connected with agriculture. The annual flood could transform the landscape. Fields that had been dry could become covered with nutrient-rich water. As the water receded, fertile soil remained. Farmers could plant. Crops could grow. Harvests followed. This cycle supported the population. But agriculture still required hard work. Farmers used simple tools. Plows could be pulled by animals. Sickles were used to harvest grain. Winnowing separated grain from chaff. Threshing removed grain from stalks. The harvested grain had to be stored. Storage was critical. A kingdom needed reserves. Bad harvests could cause shortages. Grain could be taxed. It could be redistributed. It could feed workers. It could supply armies. It could support temples. The administration of grain was therefore a major responsibility. Scribes recorded quantities. Granaries stored supplies. Officials monitored distribution. A large state depended on food management. And this brings us back to something that can easily be overlooked. The pyramids were possible because Egypt could feed the people who built them. The temples were possible because farmers produced surplus grain. The armies were possible because agriculture supported soldiers. The scribal bureaucracy was possible because the economy generated resources. The entire civilization rested on food. Bread was not merely something people ate. It was the foundation of the state. Barley and wheat were therefore strategically important crops. Beer could provide calories and hydration. Bread provided energy. Together, they formed an important part of the diet. The preparation of bread was a daily activity. Grain had to be ground. Flour had to be mixed with water. Dough had to be shaped. It could be baked in ovens. Different breads could be produced. Some were simple. Others could contain dates, honey, fruits, or other ingredients. Ancient Egyptian baking scenes show the process. Beer production was also common. The exact recipes varied. The beverage was often produced from fermented grain products. It could be flavored or thickened. Beer was consumed by workers, farmers, and elites. It was an everyday beverage rather than simply a luxury. Alcoholic drinks were not the only beverages. Water was essential. Wine was also produced, especially in certain regions and for wealthier households. Grapes could be grown in vineyards. Wine was associated with elite consumption and religious rituals. The Egyptians also produced various fruit-based and fermented drinks. Food culture was therefore richer than the simple image of bread and beer suggests. Vegetables were important. Onions and garlic were common. Lettuce was cultivated. Dates and figs provided sweetness. Grapes could be eaten fresh or dried. Fish from the Nile provided protein. Cattle, sheep, goats, and poultry could provide meat. But meat consumption depended on wealth and circumstances. Elite households could afford more animal products. Ordinary people relied more heavily on grains, vegetables, legumes, and fish. The diet therefore reflected social status. Even the food on someone's table could reveal their place within society. And yet food was also a source of pleasure. Festivals could involve feasting. Banquets could include wine, meat, fruit, bread, and sweet foods. Music played. Guests talked. Servants moved through the room. Perfumes filled the air. Flowers decorated spaces. Wealthy Egyptians could host elaborate gatherings. Scenes from tombs depict banquets with guests reclining or sitting while musicians and servants attend to them. Some guests wear elaborate jewelry. Some hold lotus flowers. Wine flows. The atmosphere appears festive. Ancient Egyptians knew how to enjoy themselves. They also played games. Board games were popular. The most famous is Senet. Senet was played on a board with 30 squares. Players moved pieces according to rules that remain only partly understood. The game may have had religious associations, especially in later periods. It could represent a journey through challenges toward the afterlife. But it was also simply a game. People have been playing games for thousands of years. A board, pieces, rules, competition, luck, strategy, a desire to win. The ancient Egyptian world had all of these. Other games existed too. Children played with dolls, balls, animals, and miniature objects. Some toys have survived. Small wooden figures could represent people or animals. Dolls could have movable parts. Balls could be made from leather or plant materials. Children could play games involving movement and skill. This is another area where archaeology becomes unexpectedly intimate. A child's toy tells us that someone once played with it. The toy may have been dropped, broken, repaired, passed down, eventually buried or discarded. Thousands of years later, archaeologists find it. The child is gone, the family is gone, the house is gone, but the toy remains. It is almost like a tiny message from childhood across time. And perhaps that is why ancient Egypt can feel so close. We recognize the large things because they are famous, but we understand the civilization through the small things. A cup, a comb, a toy, a loaf, a sandal, a letter, a bead, a fishing hook, a broken pot. These objects remind us that history was lived one ordinary day at a time. The pyramids were not built in a single moment. The temples were not decorated overnight. The civilization did not appear fully formed. It accumulated, year after year, generation after generation. Someone planted a crop. Someone carved a stone. Someone taught a child. Someone wrote a letter. Someone built a house. Someone repaired a boat. Someone told a story. Someone buried a loved one. Someone looked at the stars. And all of those actions slowly became the civilization we now call ancient Egypt. The river continues flowing. The stars remain overhead. The desert wind moves softly across the sand. And perhaps now, as you listen, the ancient streets are becoming quieter again. The markets have closed. The boats are tied. The temples are dim. The families have gone to sleep. A final lamp flickers inside a house. Someone turns onto their side. A child sleeps nearby. Outside, the Nile moves beneath the moon. And above the rooftops, the same stars that guided ancient astronomers shine silently. The civilization may have disappeared, but the sky did not, and the river did not. And perhaps that is where we should leave ourselves for a moment. Beside the water, under the stars, in the quiet, ancient Egypt is still waiting. And as the night continues, we can wander deeper still, into the tombs of kings, the mysteries of the Sphinx, the lives of powerful queens, the ancient understanding of the heavens, the strange creatures of the Nile, the secrets hidden inside pyramids, and the remarkable ways Egyptians imagined eternity. For now, let the river carry you onward. Slowly, quietly, without hurry, the Nile flows beneath the stars, and ancient Egypt dreams beneath the same endless sky. The Nile flows quietly beneath the stars, and as the night deepens, we can travel farther into the ancient Egyptian imagination. Away from the markets, away from the fields, away from the crowded temples, toward the places where the Egyptians believed the boundary between life and death became thin. The tombs, the hidden chambers, the quiet valleys, the enormous monuments that still stand beneath the modern sky. Among all the places associated with ancient Egypt, few are as mysterious as the Valley of the Kings. The valley lies on the western side of the Nile near ancient Thebes, where the desert rises into rugged limestone mountains. For centuries, Egyptian kings had been buried in increasingly elaborate monuments. The Great Pyramids of the Old Kingdom were enormous expressions of royal power. But during the New Kingdom, royal burial traditions changed. Instead of building enormous pyramids that could be easily seen from far away, kings were buried in hidden rock-cut tombs. The landscape itself became part of the protection. A tomb could be carved deep into the mountain. Corridors could descend underground. Chambers could be decorated with images and texts. The entrance could be concealed. The goal was not simply to create a beautiful monument. It was to protect the dead king and everything required for his eternal existence. The valley was remote. The surrounding mountains provided natural barriers. Yet the tombs were not always safe. Ancient tomb robbers knew that royal burials contained enormous wealth: gold, jewelry, furniture, amulets, ceremonial objects, precious stones. Even if the tomb itself was hidden, its contents could be extremely valuable. Robbery became such a serious problem that officials sometimes investigated stolen tomb goods. Some surviving papyri contain records of interrogations involving tomb robbery. These documents are fascinating because they reveal the less glamorous side of royal burial. The tombs were sacred, but they were also treasure houses. And treasure attracts people. Some robbers may have been ordinary criminals. Others may have had connections to workers who knew the locations of tombs. Some officials themselves could become involved. Corruption was not unknown in ancient Egypt. A highly organized society could still contain dishonest people. Records of disputes, theft, bribery, and abuse of authority survive. This is another reminder that ancient Egypt was not a perfect civilization frozen in harmony. It was a real society. Real societies are complicated. People make mistakes. People become ambitious. People become jealous. People cooperate. People betray one another. People try to protect their families. People sometimes break the rules. And sometimes the written record preserves their stories. One of the most famous royal tombs belongs to Tutankhamun. When Howard Carter discovered the entrance in 1922, the tomb became one of the most celebrated archaeological discoveries in history. Tutankhamun was not one of Egypt's greatest conquerors. He did not reign for decades. He became king as a child. His reign was relatively short, yet his tomb contained an extraordinary collection of objects. The reason his burial survived so well may partly be connected with its relatively small size and its later concealment. Other royal tombs had been robbed. Tutankhamun's burial was overlooked or protected by chance for centuries. Inside were chariots, furniture, weapons, clothing, jewelry, walking sticks, food, containers, statues, and the famous golden burial mask. The mask has become one of the most recognizable objects associated with ancient Egypt. It was created from gold and decorated with colored materials. The face represents the young king in an idealized royal form. The Nemes headcloth frames his face. The uraeus and vulture symbols appear above the forehead. The false beard emphasizes kingship. The mask was not simply a portrait. It was a royal and religious object. It helped transform the dead king into an eternal being. Yet Tutankhamun's tomb also contained mundane objects. A king needed things: clothing, food, sandals, furniture, weapons, walking sticks, games, even objects that might seem surprisingly personal. This gives us a more intimate image of the young ruler. He was not simply a golden face behind glass. He was a person who lived a short life. He may have suffered from physical problems. He hunted. He participated in royal ceremonies. He had a family. He had servants. He had favorite objects. He had responsibilities. And then, unexpectedly, he died. His burial had to be prepared quickly. His death created an administrative challenge. A king could not simply disappear. The state had to continue. The rituals had to be performed. The tomb had to be prepared. The body had to be preserved. The next ruler had to be established. And the kingdom had to move forward. Tutankhamun's burial is therefore both beautiful and sad. The enormous wealth surrounding him cannot hide the fact that he died young. A civilization famous for its concern with eternity was still unable to prevent the death of a young king. Perhaps that is one reason his story remains so powerful. He was supposed to become eternal, and in a strange way, he did. His name is now known around the world. His face is recognized thousands of years after his death. His burial objects have become symbols of ancient Egypt. The ancient Egyptians believed that preserving a person's name helped preserve their existence. Tutankhamun's name certainly survived. The Valley of the Kings contains many other stories. Some tombs are enormous. Some contain long corridors. Some contain colorful astronomical scenes. Some were never completed. Some were damaged. Some were reused. And some remain difficult to interpret. The walls of these tombs were covered with texts intended to help the deceased navigate the afterlife. One of the major collections of funerary literature is known as the Book of the Dead. The title can be misleading. It was not a single book. Rather, it was a collection of spells and texts that could be selected and arranged for individual burials. Different people had different combinations. Some scrolls were beautifully illustrated. Others were relatively plain. The purpose was to help the deceased navigate the dangers of the afterlife. The journey could involve gates, guardians, questions, monsters, bodies of water, darkness, divine judgment. The deceased needed knowledge. Names mattered. Words mattered. Correct rituals mattered. The afterlife was imagined as a place where preparation could make a difference. This makes the Book of the Dead almost like an ancient survival guide. But it was also a spiritual text. It expressed hopes. The hope to live again. The hope to be protected. The hope to reunite with family. The hope to become one with the gods. The hope to continue existing. The desire for immortality is one of humanity's oldest dreams. Ancient Egypt simply expressed it with extraordinary persistence. The dead could be depicted sitting at tables filled with offerings. They could be shown hunting, fishing, sailing, working in fields, meeting gods, traveling through the underworld. The images were meant to help create the reality they represented. If a tomb showed food, perhaps the deceased would always have food. If it showed servants, perhaps servants would remain available. If it showed fields, perhaps the deceased would always have fertile land. Images were therefore more than decoration. They could have magical and functional meaning. The boundary between representation and reality was different from the modern concept. An image could participate in what it represented. A name could sustain identity. A statue could serve as a body for a spirit. A written offering could have a ritual function. This is why Egyptian statues were so carefully constructed. The eyes were important. The face was important. The body needed to be recognizable. The name might be inscribed. If the original body was damaged, a statue could provide another physical form. Some statues were hidden inside tombs. Others were placed in temples. Royal statues could show the king seated, standing, walking, offering, receiving the protection of a deity. The posture communicated status. Size communicated importance. A king could be depicted larger than surrounding figures. A god could be represented in symbolic forms. The art followed conventions that lasted for thousands of years. One famous convention is the composite human figure. The head is shown in profile. The eye is shown from the front. The shoulders are presented broadly. The torso is often frontal. The legs are shown from the side. To modern eyes, this can look unusual, but it was an intentional system. The artist was not trying to create a photographic image. The goal was to show the most recognizable and complete aspects of the human body simultaneously. The eye needed to be visible. The shoulders needed to be clear. The feet needed to be recognizable. The result was an idealized representation designed for permanence. This visual language became one of the defining features of Egyptian art. It also made Egyptian images instantly recognizable thousands of years later. The same visual principles could be used on tomb walls, temple reliefs, papyri, jewelry, and statues. But Egyptian artists were capable of remarkable realism when they wanted it. Some private portraits showed distinctive facial features. Animals could be rendered with extraordinary detail. Plants could be carefully observed. Birds could be represented with recognizable anatomy. Scenes of everyday life can be surprisingly lively. Farmers bend over fields. Fishermen pull nets. Cattle are driven. Workers carry loads. Musicians play. Dancers move. Birds fly. Fish swim. The walls of a tomb could become an entire living landscape. And this landscape was sometimes deliberately beautiful. Egyptian artists used colors that could remain surprisingly vivid. Blue, green, red, yellow, white, black. Colors were often symbolic as well as decorative. Green could be associated with fertility, vegetation, and regeneration. Black could represent the fertile soil of the Nile and concepts of regeneration. Blue could evoke the sky and water. Red could carry associations with energy, danger, or the desert. Color transformed stone into a living environment. Imagine entering a tomb thousands of years ago. The entrance is dark. You walk deeper. Then suddenly the walls appear. Figures emerge from the darkness. Painted gods, stars, boats, plants, animals, rows of writing. The colors may seem almost alive. The effect must have been extraordinary, and perhaps the darkness itself was part of the experience. The tomb was underground. The outside world disappeared. The deceased entered another realm. The architecture created a psychological transition, from sunlight to darkness, from life to death, from ordinary time to sacred time. The Egyptians understood the power of spaces. Temples were designed to guide people through different levels of sacredness. Large courtyards could accommodate crowds. Hypostyle halls could contain enormous forests of columns. Inner sanctuaries became increasingly restricted. The farther inward a person traveled, the more private the sacred space became. At the center could be the shrine of the deity. The temple was therefore not simply a place where people gathered. It was considered the dwelling place of the god. The god's image lived there. Priests cared for it. They performed rituals. They presented food. They dressed the divine image. They burned incense. The rituals could occur daily. The temple functioned almost like a royal household for the deity. The gods needed to be honored. The priesthood was therefore an important institution. Priests were not always full-time in the modern sense. Some priestly offices rotated. Others were permanent. Temple institutions could own land. They could manage workers. They could control agricultural resources. They could operate workshops. Large temples were economic centers as well as religious centers. A temple could function almost like a small city. It needed food, clothing, tools, building materials, animals, personnel, records. The temple bureaucracy therefore required administrators and scribes. Religious and economic power were intertwined. This made temples extremely influential. One of the greatest temple complexes was Karnak. Over centuries, different pharaohs expanded it. The result is enormous. Pylons, courtyards, obelisks, chapels, sanctuaries, columns, statues, inscriptions. Each generation added its own layer. Walking through Karnak is therefore like walking through a timeline. One king builds something. Another king modifies it. A later ruler adds a monument. A successor changes an inscription. The complex grows. Ancient Egypt was constantly rebuilding itself. Sometimes rulers deliberately removed earlier names. Sometimes they simply reused older structures. Stone was valuable. A monument could become the foundation for another. An old statue could be recarved. A temple could be expanded. History was physically layered. This is particularly visible at temples where different rulers left inscriptions beside one another. The result is a conversation across centuries. A king speaks through stone. Another king adds his own voice. A later generation restores the monument. Eventually, archaeologists arrive. And now we can read the conversation. One of the most remarkable features of Egyptian temples is the obelisk. These tall, narrow stone monuments taper toward a pyramid-shaped top. They were associated with the sun and the solar cult. Obelisks could be carved from a single piece of stone. That required enormous effort. The famous unfinished obelisk at Aswan provides an extraordinary glimpse into the process. It remains partially attached to the bedrock. Its incomplete state reveals the scale of the project. Imagine workers beginning to carve a massive block of granite. They had to carefully shape it. A mistake could ruin the entire monument. The stone could crack. The project could be abandoned. The unfinished obelisk, therefore, becomes an archaeological time capsule. It shows not just the finished achievement, but the moment when work stopped. Stone quarrying was dangerous. Workers used stone hammers and copper or bronze tools, depending on the period and material. Harder stones required pounding with harder stones. Granite was particularly difficult. The process was slow, yet enormous quantities of stone were moved. How? Through organized labor. Transport, ramps, levers, sledges, boats, teams of workers. The exact techniques varied. But ancient Egyptian engineering was highly sophisticated. Large stones could be transported on sledges. Wet sand may have reduced friction. Experiments have shown that adding water to sand can make pulling heavy objects easier under certain conditions. Ancient tomb paintings even show workers pouring liquid in front of sledges. The image may represent a practical technique. The famous question of pyramid construction, therefore, does not require mysterious technology. It requires organization. Thousands of workers, skilled engineers, stonecutters, carpenters, boatmen, surveyors, scribes, food suppliers, managers, and years of coordinated effort. The pyramids were enormous administrative projects. They were not simply piles of stones. The Great Pyramid of Giza was originally covered with polished limestone casing stones. When the sun struck the smooth surface, the monument would have appeared dramatically different from the weathered structure seen today. The top may have been finished with a capstone, perhaps made from stone and possibly covered with a precious material. The pyramid would have shone in the sunlight. The surrounding complex included temples, causeways, smaller pyramids, tombs, and other structures. The pyramid was part of a much larger sacred landscape. Nearby stood the Great Sphinx. The Sphinx combines the body of a lion with a human head. Its exact symbolism remains debated. It is commonly associated with royal power. The lion represented strength. The human head represented intelligence and kingship. The monument gazes toward the horizon. For thousands of years, the Sphinx has watched the landscape. Wind has blown across its body. Sand has accumulated around it. People have buried parts of it. Rulers have restored it. Tourists now stand nearby. But beneath all of this is an older image, a monumental guardian facing the eastern horizon. The Sphinx has lost its original nose. Many legends have developed around the missing feature. The popular claim that Napoleon's soldiers destroyed the nose is not supported by historical evidence. Drawings made before Napoleon's campaign already show the Sphinx without its nose. The damage happened earlier. The exact circumstances remain uncertain. This is a good example of how historical myths can grow around ancient monuments. People want explanations. Sometimes the simplest explanation becomes the most famous, even when evidence tells another story. Archaeology constantly requires separating evidence from legend. Ancient Egypt is filled with legends. Curses are perhaps among the most famous. The so-called Curse of Tutankhamun became popular after the tomb's discovery. Newspapers reported mysterious deaths. Stories suggested supernatural consequences. But there is no good evidence that opening Tutankhamun's tomb unleashed a supernatural curse. The real story is already fascinating enough. A sealed tomb survived for thousands of years. Inside were objects created by people who had been dead for more than 3 millennia. The discovery itself was extraordinary. No supernatural explanation was needed. Ancient Egypt has enough mystery without adding invented curses. And perhaps the quiet truth is more beautiful. The tomb was sealed. The centuries passed. Sand covered the entrance. Empires rose and fell. Languages changed. Religions changed. Cities changed. The Roman Empire came. The Roman Empire disappeared. New kingdoms emerged. New religions spread. Modern nations formed. And beneath the ground, the young king remained. Waiting. Not consciously waiting, of course, but preserved within the material world. His burial remained. His name remained. His objects remained. Time moved above him. This is what archaeology does. It allows us to encounter moments that time attempted to erase. And the deeper we look, the more ordinary the ancient world becomes. A mummy may seem mysterious, but the person inside once had a heartbeat. They ate. They slept. They worked. They loved. They had a family. They had worries. They had ambitions. They probably disliked some things and enjoyed others. They may have laughed. They may have cried. Their world was ancient. Their emotions were human. The same can be said of the farmers whose names we will never know. The workers who carried stones. The women who prepared bread. The children who played games. The fishermen who waited beside the river. The scribes who wrote letters. The craftsmen who carved statues. The sailors who traveled toward distant lands. The soldiers who marched into battle. The priests who performed rituals. The people who buried their loved ones. History often remembers kings, but civilizations are built by everyone. And ancient Egypt was built by millions of ordinary lives. Perhaps that is the most peaceful way to think about the pyramids. Not as impossible monuments created by mysterious beings, but as the result of countless human hands. One stone moved, then another. One meal prepared, one boat built, one field planted, one record written, one prayer spoken, one generation following another. Slowly, patiently, for thousands of years. And now the ancient world becomes quiet again. The stars are higher. The desert air is cooler. The Nile reflects the darkness. The temples stand in silence. The pyramids rest beneath the moon. And somewhere beneath the sand, fragments of ordinary lives remain. A broken bowl, a bead, a footprint, a grain of wheat, a piece of linen, a faded name, tiny pieces of eternity. Let yourself drift with the river. There is no need to hurry. The story is nearing its final journey. Soon we will leave the temples behind. We will leave the tombs. We will leave the pyramids. And we will travel toward the final centuries of ancient Egyptian civilization, toward the arrival of foreign rulers, toward the Greeks, toward Cleopatra, toward Rome, and finally toward the long transformation that carried Egypt from the ancient world into history. But for now, the Nile continues, the stars remain, and the ancient stones are quiet beneath the night. The Nile continues to flow beneath the ancient stars. And now, as our journey moves toward its final chapter, we can slowly travel forward through the last great centuries of ancient Egyptian civilization. The pyramids are already ancient. The temples have been expanded by generations of kings. The names of countless pharaohs have already become distant memories. And yet Egypt continues. The river still provides water. The fields still turn green after the flood. Farmers still plant their crops. Boats still travel north and south. Temples still burn incense. Families still gather around meals. Children still play beside the river. Life continues, even as history begins to change around them. By the first millennium BCE, Egypt had already experienced thousands of years of civilization. But the political world around it was becoming increasingly complicated. Foreign powers were growing stronger. Assyrians, Persians, Greeks, and eventually Romans. Egypt would be conquered more than once. Yet each new power would discover that ruling Egypt was not as simple as taking control of its cities. Egypt had an enormous cultural identity. Its temples were ancient. Its priesthoods were powerful. Its gods were deeply established. Its writing system carried thousands of years of tradition. Its population had its own language and customs. Foreign rulers therefore often adopted Egyptian symbols of kingship. They wanted to present themselves not simply as conquerors, but as legitimate pharaohs. This is one of the fascinating patterns of Egyptian history. Foreign rulers entered Egypt, but Egypt also transformed the rulers. They could adopt Egyptian titles. They could build temples in Egyptian styles. They could make offerings to Egyptian gods. They could place their names inside cartouches. They could present themselves wearing traditional royal crowns. The civilization was changing, but it was not simply disappearing. Instead, it absorbed new influences. The Persian rulers who controlled Egypt at various times became part of the complicated political story. Then came Alexander the Great. In 332 BCE, Alexander entered Egypt. The Egyptians were unhappy with Persian rule and accepted him as a liberator. Alexander was recognized in Egyptian religious contexts as a pharaoh. He visited the Oracle of Ammonius at Siwa Oasis. The journey into the desert became part of his legend. The oracle reportedly recognized Alexander as a son of the god Ammonius. Whether every later detail is historically accurate is difficult to know, but the association between Alexander and Egyptian kingship became important. Alexander also founded the city that would become one of the greatest centers of the ancient Mediterranean world, Alexandria. Located along the Mediterranean coast, Alexandria became a major center of commerce, scholarship, culture, and political power. The city connected Egypt with the wider Greek-speaking world. Ships arrived from across the Mediterranean. Merchants carried goods. Scholars traveled. Ideas circulated. Languages mixed. Alexandria became one of the most cosmopolitan cities of antiquity. Its famous institutions included the Mouseion, an intellectual center associated with scholars and learning. The Great Library of Alexandria became legendary. The exact history of the library is complicated. It was not necessarily one single building that suddenly burned down in one dramatic event. Instead, the library and its associated collections probably changed over centuries. Different losses may have occurred at different times. The popular story of one enormous fire destroying all ancient knowledge is much too simple. Knowledge disappears gradually. Books decay. Libraries decline. Wars disrupt institutions. Political priorities change. Copies are not made. Languages change. A text can disappear without a dramatic catastrophe. Yet Alexandria still became one of the greatest intellectual centers of the ancient world. Scholars studied mathematics, astronomy, medicine, literature, geography, philosophy, language. One of the most famous scholars associated with Alexandria was Eratosthenes. He calculated the circumference of the Earth using observations of shadows and geometry. His estimate was remarkably close to the true value. He did not need satellites. He did not need photographs from space. He needed sunlight, a measuring stick, geometry, and careful reasoning. The basic idea was elegant. At a particular time of year, the sun could be nearly overhead at one location, while a vertical object at another location produced a measurable shadow. The difference in angle could be used to estimate the Earth's curvature. If you know the distance between the two locations, geometry allows you to estimate the circumference of the planet. This is one of the most beautiful examples of ancient scientific reasoning. The Earth did not need to be physically measured from edge to edge. Its size could be inferred from shadows. Ancient Egyptian and Greek scholars also studied the sky. The Egyptians had watched the heavens for thousands of years. The annual appearance of Sirius was particularly important. Sirius, known to the Egyptians as Sopdet, appeared in the morning sky around the time of the Nile's annual inundation in certain historical periods. The timing was not perfectly fixed because of astronomical changes, but the association became significant. The stars provided a natural calendar. The moon provided another. The sun provided the basic rhythm of the day. Ancient Egyptian astronomers tracked celestial movements carefully. Their temples could have astronomical associations. Ceilings were decorated with stars. Constellations were represented in symbolic forms. The Egyptians developed a calendar of 365 days. The year was divided into 12 months of 30 days each, followed by 5 additional days. This system was remarkably useful. But because 365 days is slightly shorter than the actual solar year, the calendar gradually drifted relative to the seasons. Over long periods, this drift became significant. Still, the calendar allowed the administration of agriculture, taxation, festivals, and government to function. Time was one of the things ancient Egypt learned to organize. Days could be divided into hours. Water clocks could measure time at night. Sundials could track the movement of the sun. The Egyptians also observed the changing length of daylight. They understood that the year followed cycles. The sky was not random. It had patterns, and patterns could be studied. This approach appears throughout Egyptian knowledge. Medicine, for example, combined practical observation with religious ideas. Ancient Egyptian medical texts contain descriptions of injuries, symptoms, and treatments. The Edwin Smith surgical papyrus is particularly fascinating because it focuses heavily on injuries. It describes wounds, fractures, dislocations, head injuries. Different parts of the body are identified. Treatment recommendations are given. Some cases are described as treatable, others as uncertain, others as untreatable. This shows a practical approach to trauma. A physician might examine an injury and classify it. They might recommend treatment. They might observe the patient's condition. They might predict an outcome. The ancient Egyptians also understood some aspects of anatomy through experience with injuries and mummification. But their medical theories were not the same as modern medicine. They mixed observation with spiritual explanations. Diseases could be associated with supernatural causes. Magical spells could accompany physical treatments. Herbal preparations could be used. Bandages could be applied. Honey, oils, resins, and various plants had medicinal uses. Some treatments may have been effective. Others probably were not. Ancient medicine was a mixture of knowledge, experience, tradition, and belief. This is true of many early medical systems. The important point is that ancient Egyptian healers were actively trying to understand the body. They observed, they recorded, they experimented, they passed knowledge forward. And some of their texts survived long enough for modern researchers to study them. The Egyptians were also skilled in dental care, although dental disease was common. The diet could contain particles of sand and stone from grinding grain. These abrasive particles could wear down teeth. Imagine grinding grain between stones. Tiny mineral fragments could become mixed with flour. Over time, eating such food could wear away tooth enamel. Some people suffered from abscesses and infections. Dental pain was a real problem. Ancient Egyptians developed various approaches to treating pain and infection. Again, some were practical, some were symbolic, and some may have been ineffective. But the suffering was real. Ancient Egypt was not a world without illness. People experienced disease. Children died young. Women faced dangers during childbirth. Infections could become serious. Injuries from farming and construction were common. Life expectancy was much lower than in modern wealthy societies. Yet many people survived into adulthood and old age. The idea that everyone died extremely young is also too simplistic. Life expectancy at birth was low largely because infant and child mortality was high. A person who survived childhood could live considerably longer. Some Egyptian officials lived into their 60s or beyond. Mummies provide evidence of people who survived years of life. Their bones can reveal injuries. Their teeth can reveal diet. Their skeletons can reveal physical labor. Their bodies can sometimes reveal disease. Modern science can examine these remains using imaging technology and laboratory analysis. CT scans can reveal structures without opening a mummy. DNA studies can sometimes provide information about ancestry and relationships. Chemical analysis can reveal aspects of diet and migration. Ancient bodies have become scientific archives, but they are also human remains. The study of mummies therefore raises ethical questions. They are not simply objects. They belong to people. They once had names, families, lives. The modern fascination with mummies sometimes forgets this. A respectful approach remembers that every mummy represents a human being. Someone who once looked at the Nile. Someone who once heard music. Someone who once held a child. Someone who once expected another morning. The same is true of every ancient burial. And perhaps this is why the quiet study of ancient Egypt can become surprisingly emotional. The monuments are enormous, but the people were small. The pyramids dominate the landscape, yet individual lives pass quickly. A farmer could spend decades working beside the Nile. Then one day, their life ended. Their family mourned. Their body was buried. The family returned to work. The seasons continued. The river flooded. The crops grew. Another generation was born. This cycle continued for thousands of years. And eventually, even the language changed. The ancient Egyptian language developed through several stages. Hieroglyphic writing remained important for monumental inscriptions. Hieratic was a more cursive form used for everyday administrative and literary writing. Later, Demotic became common. Eventually, Coptic developed as a later stage of the Egyptian language written mainly using Greek letters with additional signs. The ancient language, therefore, did not simply disappear overnight. It evolved, changed, adapted. The modern Coptic language preserves a descendant of ancient Egyptian. This is another beautiful reminder that civilizations do not always vanish completely. They can survive inside later languages, inside traditions, inside names, inside religious practices, inside landscapes, inside food, inside architecture, inside people's memories. The Egyptian civilization continued to evolve through the Ptolemaic period. The Ptolemaic dynasty was founded by one of Alexander's generals, Ptolemy. The rulers were Macedonian Greek, but they adopted Egyptian royal traditions. They built temples in Egyptian architectural styles. They presented themselves as pharaohs. One of the most famous members of the dynasty was Cleopatra VII. Cleopatra is perhaps the most famous woman in ancient Egyptian history, but her story is often distorted by popular culture. She was not ethnically Egyptian in the simple sense. She belonged to the Ptolemaic dynasty, which had Macedonian Greek origins. Yet she embraced Egyptian kingship and associated herself strongly with the goddess Isis. She was also an extraordinarily capable political figure. Cleopatra was educated. She was involved in diplomacy. She understood political alliances. She reportedly spoke several languages. Unlike some of her Ptolemaic predecessors, she is said to have learned the Egyptian language. Her political world was dangerous. The Ptolemaic dynasty had a long tradition of family marriages and succession disputes. Royal siblings could become political rivals. Power could change rapidly. Cleopatra became queen in a complicated political environment. She eventually became closely associated with Julius Caesar. Their relationship had political as well as personal dimensions. Cleopatra had a son with Caesar, Caesarion. After Caesar's assassination, Cleopatra became involved with Mark Antony. Their alliance connected Egypt with the Roman political world. For a time, Cleopatra and Antony controlled enormous resources. They had armies, ships, wealth, political influence. But Rome was becoming the dominant power in the Mediterranean. Octavian, the future Augustus, became their rival. The conflict culminated in the Battle of Actium in 31 BCE. Cleopatra and Antony were defeated. The following year, Roman forces entered Egypt. Antony died. Cleopatra died soon afterward. The exact circumstances of her death remain uncertain. Ancient sources describe a serpent or asp, but the historical details are debated. With Cleopatra's death, the Ptolemaic dynasty ended. Egypt became a Roman province. This was a major turning point. Egypt was no longer ruled by a native pharaoh or a Hellenistic royal dynasty. It became part of the Roman Empire. But even under Roman rule, Egyptian religion continued. Temples remained active. Priests continued rituals. Egyptian gods continued to be worshipped. Roman emperors were depicted in Egyptian style on temple walls. They could appear as pharaohs making offerings to Egyptian deities. The political reality had changed. The religious language remained. This is another example of cultural continuity. Rome ruled Egypt. But Egypt did not simply become Roman overnight. Egyptian traditions continued for centuries. Alexandria remained an important city. Greek remained widely used. Egyptian continued. Latin also appeared in administration. Different cultures existed together. This mixture could be fascinating. A person in Roman Egypt might speak one language at home and another in business. They might worship Egyptian gods. They might participate in Greek cultural traditions. They might use Roman coins. The ancient world was multicultural. Identity could be layered. The spread of Christianity eventually transformed Egypt again. Christian communities developed in Egypt during the early centuries CE. Over time, Christianity became increasingly influential. Traditional Egyptian temples gradually declined. Some were abandoned. Others continued for centuries. The last known hieroglyphic inscription was carved at the Temple of Philae in the 4th century CE. After that, the ancient writing system fell out of use. The language itself continued in evolving forms, but hieroglyphs became silent. The gods whose names had been written on temple walls for thousands of years were no longer being worshipped in the same traditional way. The temples became ruins. Sand moved through their courtyards. Birds nested among columns. The river continued. People lived nearby. New religions had taken root. New political systems emerged. The ancient world was becoming something else. And eventually, the ability to read the hieroglyphs disappeared. For more than 1,000 years, the inscriptions remained mysterious. Visitors could see the symbols, but they could not understand them. A temple wall might contain thousands of words, yet to later generations it looked like a collection of strange pictures. Then came the Rosetta Stone, a single decree, 3 scripts, one of them Greek. The possibility of decipherment. Scholars worked for years. The puzzle slowly opened, and when Champollion recognized the importance of phonetic signs and royal names, the ancient language began to speak again. Imagine that moment. A word written more than 3,000 years earlier suddenly becomes understandable. A name emerges. A king's name, a god's name, a place, a sentence, a prayer. A person who had been silent for centuries could finally be heard. It is difficult to imagine a more beautiful form of historical resurrection. Not resurrection of the body, not resurrection of a king, but resurrection of a voice. The stones had never forgotten. Humanity had simply forgotten how to listen. And once the language was recovered, Egypt's monuments became more than mysterious ruins. They became documents. The walls could tell us what the ancient Egyptians believed, what they feared, what they celebrated, who ruled, who served, who built, who worshipped, who traveled, who died, who hoped to live forever. Of course, the inscriptions do not tell us everything. Most ordinary people left no written record. Many voices remain silent. Women outside elite circles are often less visible. Children are rarely named. Laborers are sometimes mentioned collectively. Enslaved and dependent populations are difficult to reconstruct. History is uneven. Some people leave enormous monuments. Others disappear almost completely. Archaeologists try to recover those missing voices through ordinary objects. Homes, tools, food remains, burials, work settlements, bones, pottery, even garbage. Ancient garbage can be incredibly valuable. What people throw away tells us what they used. Food waste can reveal diet. Broken pottery can reveal household activity. Animal bones can reveal which species were consumed. Seeds can reveal crops. Charcoal can reveal fuel. Discarded objects can reveal trade. The past is hidden not only in palaces. It is hidden in trash. This is one of the quiet miracles of archaeology. Something considered worthless by the people who discarded it can become priceless thousands of years later. A broken pot becomes evidence. A seed becomes history. A fish bone becomes a clue. A piece of charcoal becomes a date. A footprint becomes a moment. Ancient Egypt therefore survives in fragments. Not everything was preserved. Not everything was discovered. Not everything has been understood. And that uncertainty is part of the beauty. There are still questions. There are still tombs. There are still inscriptions. There are still archaeological sites waiting to reveal something new. Technology continues to change how we investigate the past. Ground-penetrating radar, satellite imagery, digital mapping, 3D scanning, computed tomography, chemical analysis, genetic studies. These tools allow researchers to investigate without always disturbing the remains. The pyramids themselves have revealed hidden spaces through modern scanning techniques. Muon imaging has allowed researchers to detect differences in density inside large monuments. Invisible particles from cosmic rays can pass through stone. By measuring their behavior, scientists can identify spaces hidden within massive structures. It is extraordinary to think that particles created high in Earth's atmosphere can help us understand monuments built thousands of years ago. The universe is helping us read the past. And perhaps that connects beautifully with the ancient Egyptian fascination with the sky. They watched the heavens. We now use cosmic particles to investigate their monuments. Thousands of years separate the questions, but the curiosity is similar. What is above us? What is inside? What happens after death? How large is the world? How does the sun move? Why do the stars return? What keeps the universe in order? Ancient Egyptians answered some of these questions through mythology. Modern science answers others through observation and mathematics. But both begin with curiosity, the desire to understand. And perhaps that is one of the deepest connections between us and the people of ancient Egypt. They were curious too. They looked at the sky. They watched the river. They studied animals. They observed injuries. They measured fields. They counted grain. They built structures. They recorded information. They asked questions. They searched for order in a world that could be unpredictable. Their answers were shaped by their culture. Ours are shaped by ours. But the desire to understand remains. And now, after thousands of years of kings and queens, farmers and priests, builders and sailors, scholars and soldiers, we can slowly return to the quiet river. The great temples are behind us. The pyramids are behind us. The royal tombs are behind us. The palace of Cleopatra is behind us. The Roman world is behind us. The ancient gods have become stories. The hieroglyphs have become inscriptions in museums and archaeological sites. The old kingdoms have become chapters in history. But the Nile is still here. And that may be the most fitting place to end. Because long before the first pyramid was built, the river was already flowing. Before the first dynasty, before the first pharaoh, before the great temples, before the royal tombs, the Nile moved through the landscape. It carried water. It carried fish. It carried boats. It carried silt. It carried life. Generations were born beside it. Generations died beside it. The river remained. The civilization grew around it. And when the civilization changed, the river remained. Imagine the Nile now, not as a map, not as a line in a textbook, but as water moving quietly beneath the night. The moon is reflected on its surface. The palms stand dark against the sky. The desert stretches beyond the fields. The air is cool. The stars are bright. There is no traffic, no modern city noise, no glowing screens, only the soft movement of water. Somewhere nearby, an ancient village has gone quiet. The day's work is finished. The bread has been eaten. The tools have been put away. The boats are resting beside the shore. The animals are quiet. The lamps are fading. A family is sleeping. A child is dreaming. And above them, the same stars are shining that ancient astronomers once watched. Perhaps a priest once stood outside a temple and studied those stars. Perhaps a farmer once looked upward and wondered when the flood would arrive. Perhaps a sailor used the sky to guide a boat. Perhaps a child once pointed upward and asked about the lights. We will never know their exact thoughts, but we know they looked, because they left the sky everywhere. On ceilings, on coffins, on calendars, in myths, in temples. They carried the heavens into their architecture. The stars became part of eternity. And now we can look upward too. The same universe surrounds us. The same sunlight reaches Earth. The same moon crosses the sky. The same stars travel across the darkness. The universe that watched over ancient Egypt is still watching over us. The pyramids were built to resist time. But even the pyramids could not stop time. The temples were carved with thousands of words. But even words can become silent. The tombs were sealed. But eventually they were opened. The kings wanted eternity. Yet their kingdoms passed away. And still, something remained. A name, a story, a statue, a fragment, a melody, a recipe, a piece of pottery, a painted wall, a river, a star. Perhaps immortality was never about stopping time. Perhaps it was about leaving something behind that could cross it. A person dies, but their name can remain. A civilization disappears, but its stories can remain. A language falls silent, but its words can be rediscovered. A monument becomes a ruin, but it can still inspire wonder. Ancient Egypt survives because people continued to remember. And now, for a little while, we have remembered it together. We have wandered through its fields. We have watched its boats. We have entered its temples. We have followed its kings. We have listened to its myths. We have explored its tombs. We have imagined its homes. We have watched its children play. We have stood beneath its stars. And now it is time to let the ancient world become quiet again. There is nothing more you need to learn tonight. You can let the details drift away. You do not need to remember every name. You do not need to remember every dynasty. You do not need to remember every temple. Let only the atmosphere remain. The river, the desert, the pyramids, the stars, the quiet. Let the story dissolve into the darkness. Imagine the Nile moving slowly beside you. Its surface catches a little moonlight. A soft breeze passes through the palms. The sand is cool beneath the night sky. Far away, the silhouette of a pyramid rises against the stars. The monument is silent. It does not need to speak. It has already waited thousands of years. And perhaps that is the lesson of ancient Egypt. Everything changes. Kings change. Cities change. Languages change. Religions change. People change. Civilizations change. But some things move more slowly. Rivers, mountains, stars, the turning of the earth, the rising of the sun, the quiet rhythm of night. Ancient Egyptians lived beneath the same universe. They watched the same sunrise. They felt the same warmth. They stood beneath the same moon. They listened to the same sounds of water. And although their world was unimaginably different from ours, they were still human beings trying to understand existence. They wanted their families to be safe. They wanted food. They wanted health. They wanted love. They wanted their children to survive. They wanted their names remembered. They wanted their world to remain in balance. They wanted to know what happened after death. And perhaps most of all, they wanted their lives to mean something. Those desires are still with us. Thousands of years have passed, yet the questions remain. What is life? What is death? What remains after we are gone? What does it mean to be remembered? What holds the universe together? Ancient Egypt answered these questions through gods, myths, rituals, monuments, and stories. We answer them in different ways, but we continue asking. And perhaps that is why the ancient civilization still feels alive. Not because its kings returned, not because its temples are still functioning as they once did, but because its questions are still human. So now, let the questions become quiet. There is no need to solve them tonight. The stars do not require an answer. The Nile does not require an explanation. It simply flows. The desert simply rests. The night simply arrives. And you can simply rest. Breathe slowly. Let your thoughts become softer. The ancient streets are empty now. The temple doors are closed. The torches have gone out. The boats are still. The fields are quiet. The tombs are dark. The pyramids are silhouettes beneath the moon. The stars are above everything. Above the living. Above the dead. Above the kings. Above the farmers. Above the forgotten. Above us. The same sky. The same ancient darkness. And somewhere far beyond our small world, the universe continues its endless motion. The earth turns. The moon moves. The planets travel. The stars burn. Galaxies drift. Time passes. And here, beside the ancient Nile, everything becomes peaceful. Perhaps you can imagine the river carrying a tiny reflection of the stars. Each ripple breaks the reflection. Then another appears. And another. Nothing stays perfectly still. Yet everything feels calm. That is the rhythm of the river. Movement without hurry. Change without noise. A journey without an obvious destination. Let your thoughts move the same way. If a thought appears, let it pass. If a memory appears, let it drift away. If you hear a sound, let it become part of the night. You do not need to follow every thought. You can simply rest. Ancient Egypt has become quiet. The story has reached its end. But the river continues. The stars continue. The night continues. And somewhere beneath the desert, pieces of an ancient world remain, waiting quietly, not asking to be understood all at once, not demanding attention, simply existing, like the stars, like the river, like the stones, like memory itself. So close your eyes if they are not already closed. Imagine the warm colors of sunset fading over the Nile. Gold becoming orange, orange becoming red, red becoming violet, violet becoming deep blue, and then darkness. One star appears, then another, then another. Soon the whole sky is filled with them. The ancient Egyptians once looked upward at this same darkness. Tonight, you can let those stars carry the final thoughts of our journey. The pharaohs are gone. The kingdoms are gone. The armies are gone. The markets are gone. The ancient songs have become echoes. But the sky remains. The Nile remains. And the memory remains. Ancient Egypt sleeps beneath the stars. And now you can sleep too. Let the river carry you gently into the quiet. Let the desert silence soften your thoughts. Let the stars become distant points of light. There is nowhere you need to go, nothing you need to solve, nothing you need to remember. Just rest, just breathe, just listen. The Nile flows. The desert sleeps. The pyramids stand quietly. The stars shine endlessly. And the ancient world fades gently into the night. Good night. And may your dreams drift peacefully beneath the same timeless stars that once watched over ancient Egypt.